Hot damn.
Did we make it?
We're here again. We're here. Are we here again?
I believe we are.
We are. Man, we look so pro. And we get on, we're like, did I press the right button?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Malcontents.
Worldwide Media Headquarters.
And we come
in peace.
we come in peace, sliding across the base, first base, on our face, like always.
First base?
Huh?
First base?
First base.
We can do better than first base.
I'm not so sure about that right at
Actually, you know what? You have a really strong point. Given the way things normally go around here.
This reminds me of when I worked at a repair shop, and a particular repair shop, but I would be working at a repair shop, and somebody would need something fixed, and they would need it in a couple of hours or that day or something, because they had a show. Like, I had a lot of different clients. I had a client that was in the Tonight Show band.
Oh, cool.
And he would always come in an hour.
Like you couldn't have brought it in yesterday?
Yeah, he always come in, because he lived way out in the valley someplace. So he would come into town, drop by the store, bring in this pedal that he wanted to have modified that would normally take an hour to do. And it's just a little thing. And then I'd be under pressure to, instead of saying no like any sane person would do, I went, okay, all right, fine, Joel, sure, bring it. And I'm talking about Joel DeBartolo, the bass player in the Tonight Show band in the 80s, and he was always goofing around with his gear, always just like, oh, put one more jack on it so I can have an A, B, C, D, E pedal, or like, no, that's not enough switches on there, something like that. But I would always be under the gun to get it to him while he's standing there tapping his toes, and then I'd bolt it all together. He'd play through it. Of course, it didn't work. I'd have to open it up, and oh yeah, there was a pinched wire, and then back together, and okay, it works. He'd get down to the show. He made it through the show, and then it would like conk out just right at the very end.
Conk out.
And then he'd unplug it and finish the show without it, and then bring it in the next day. And oh yeah, it was just another loose. You know, when I'm under pressure, not paying close enough attention to the job and being too much of a sucker to say, Joe, give me a day, you know. But anyway, that's what I feel like today, because I did our little project, and which of course I assumed was going to take hour, 2 hours, and it ended up taking 4, you know. But such is life.
Yeah.
And
we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole story.
It's a whole
It's a whole narrative.
It's a whole damn thing.
It's a whole franchise.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna.
Right?
I think I'm gonna get interested in doing more of this. Taking some wrecked thing.
I mean, you fooled so many people for so many years that you know what you're talking about. I mean, you might as well trade on it, you know? Let's get something going here.
Cash in those chips. Exactly. Yeah, I didn't realize how much experience I had under my belt until I don't want to say until I stopped drinking, but until you stopped drinking. Until I stopped drinking myself into oblivion, so that I could remember actually what I did the night before, you know.
When about did you stop drinking yourself into oblivion?
I think it was about the middle of last June.
Really?
No.
That's not.
No, I mean that was like, you know, late 80s, early 90s era madness.
So, if we brought someone on the show who knew you back then, what would they say about you?
What would they say about me?
Yeah, like who were you during that era?
Oh,
were you the same as you are now?
Yeah, I think
inebriated?
they would say, oh, maybe you've mellowed out a little bit, or they would say, what was your name again, or I would say, what was your name again?
I said, where's my money?
Yeah, you know, you never paid me for that repair.
Hey guys, good to see
I don't
you.
know what they would say. I'm curious.
Looking forward to this one. Never saw a Highwatt PA head for sale. Rare birds? How rare are they? I mean, I've never seen one either. That was...
Yeah, I've seen pictures of them. This is the first one I've actually seen in person.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, I knew they existed. You just don't see them that often.
Uh-huh.
They wouldn't be anything that anybody would really want to import here. When you went to a dealership that carried Hiwatts, they were only interested in carrying the amps and the cabs. They didn't want a PA system.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you want a Hiwatt 100-watt tube PA system with two 412 columns that had feigned speakers in it? Why would you want that when you could have a Shure Vocal Master, which is what the competing club PA system was at the time?
Well, it's like the Marshall PA
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, same kind of thing.
You don't see them that often.
Yeah, yeah. There used to be this band. I had this band, and there was this singer that was going around town. This is like in the mid-'70s. He wasn't that great of a singer, but in general, anytime a band was looking for a singer, it was like,
Who's your boy? Who's your boy?
You have to look good.
I got a
You
microphone.
have to know these songs, and you have to have your own PA. And
That's David Lee Roth. That's how you got the Van Halen gig, because
Yeah.
he had a PA.
yeah, that was the one of the requirements back in the day, was that you have a PA. And there was this one guy. He was kind of a borderline singer, but he would always call. Every time you put an ad in the paper for a singer, he would always call. And
Hey guys, I'm
he
a
would-
borderline singer.
he would disguise his voice a little bit, because he knows that he called that number before and talked to you before. He'd like pretend to be somebody else.
Do you have a different stage name every time?
Or something like that. But then you'd say, okay, do you have a PA? Oh yeah, what is it? And he would it's an Ovation PA. He sort of like muttered under his breath. There was only one guy in Seattle that had this
Ovation PA.
Ovation PA. It was like the tuck and roll without the diamond.
Ooh.
It was just padded vinyl thing with the.
Oh yeah.
Oh, they're really horrendous. Look them up. They were like bad. They were bad. They were good for like the hotel lounge gig or something like that. So here's this guy's like,
No version PA.
yeah, he's gonna come and audition for a band that are playing like Free and Who and Led Zeppelin tunes, and oh yeah, I got a Ovation PA.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, thanks for calling. We'll give you a call back, and then hang up and not even take his phone number. I mean, it was like,
I'll let you know when we're gonna play Misty in the hotel lounge at the Days Inn.
yeah, the Airport Hilton
Otherwise, get off my phone.
in Tukwila or wherever the hell it was. White Center.
That's funny. Do you remember what the guy was called? I love this
No,
idea of him changing up his name every time he calls.
Hey,
Rock
folks.
and roll Ricky. This is hella Hank. Did you ever sing in any of those bands?
Yeah,
Yeah?
yeah.
Which bands did you sing in?
Probably every band I was in, I sang something.
So you would sing when you were playing drums?
Oh yeah,
Oh, okay. You're
What-
doing the 70s singing drummer bit.
I just had a song.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sing
Yeah.
back of harmony.
We're gonna turn the microphone over to our drummer for a number.
Oh God. Cringe.
Put your hands together.
Cringe. Oh, I'm dying over here.
Stevie, try it.
Ah, stop! You're killing me.
Would you spin your sticks?
No, I didn't spin. But my nickname was the Brown Bomber.
explanation?
Oh, because I would always come up in front of the stage and moon the audience if I thought they weren't properly attentive.
Okay, hold on. All right, wait a minute. I asked you a few moments ago what somebody who knew you back then would say versus who you are now.
We were talking about the repair shop era around.
So you were done mooning people by then?
I don't know. Probably.
Maybe you're not done mooning people now.
Maybe not.
Depends on what happens at NAMM.
I suppose, yeah.
Wow. Well, what else has been going on? Any shop news? Riot news?
No, it's
Everything's a big secret now?
everything is a big secret now. Of course, if I say anything about what thing is making how much progress, it's going to be Instagram and Facebook and emails and, hey, heard on the show the other night you said blah, and like we're at the point right now where everything that's in development is like right around the corner. But if I say that and then something gets in the way of that, then I'm a liar. You know,
So you're doing it. The next thing up is like a Marshall modeler, is what you're doing.
That's right.
That's so on brand.
Yeah.
It's
Actually, what's happening, at the shop, what's happening at the company is that we're just shipping a lot. And even though things are kind of taming down a little bit with the back orders and stuff, there's still a lot of stuff to catch up on.
I'm gonna do John a kindness. I see what you're saying. So we're gonna do this. Exit stage. What is that? There.
You know what, John? Thanks. I mean, you're my kind of guy.
Actually, he is.
If I was paying attention, that would have
pissed
if
you
I was
off.
if I was on your side of the thing, I wouldn't be doing live chat. I'd be calling.
Right on, John. All good, man. No,
I'd be calling the shop and leaving nasty messages, knowing that I'm not at the shop and won't get the message until Monday. But
oh, that's what you do? You're that guy?
yeah.
You're that guy. So just a lot of shipping going on. A lot of things getting ready to come to fruition, but you're not quite ready to announce yet.
Well, you know what's really happening is my post-COVID mental state is improving.
Oh.
Just
Mine's not.
remarkably.
What's happening, Rob?
Hey, Rob. Good to see you. When I got COVID, when we all got COVID, and we were talking about,
We made the exchange in this room.
Yeah,
right here.
yeah. Are we? Do you have the long COVID? No. Did you have that foggy brain? No. Well, I didn't really know what people were talking about when they said brain fog. And I don't know if I experienced brain fog or if I would call it brain fog, but I would call it just a lack of motivation and a lack of ability to just focus and give a shit
Mental
about what I
acuity.
was working on. So
Have you ever been? Have you been? Are you ADHD? Have you been diagnosed?
no, but you're about to tell me if I am or not,
Oh, I don't know.
because you're gonna let me try your prescription and see if it does anything.
Oh, I don't have a prescription, but I think that I strongly think that I have it, and when I find time in my schedule, I'm going to go in and meet with a psychiatrist and see if I meet the criteria for being prescribed something, just to try it.
I always look online at the things that they say are symptoms. If you've got exhibit these characteristics, you're probably ADHD. And I read that and I go, yeah, I probably am. But do I want to take a medication for it? I don't know if it's that serious, but I do really have this ability to get really excited about some new little toy, you know, some new little shiny object in the middle of a really pressing project that I'm kind of trying to get done. And that was really bad even after I got over COVID. I was no longer contagious. I was going back to work again.
Yeah.
Everything would just distract me, and I would just be easily led off into a black corner somewhere. So
being highly motivated to pursue novel things is a hallmark of ADHD.
oh really?
Inattentive ADHD. Yeah, yeah. Like, it's one of those things where, like, the name itself is kind of misleading, you know, because you think, well, there's hyperactive in there. It must mean, well, I'm not bouncing off the wall, so it must not be me.
Mm-hmm.
But there's inattentive ADHD, which it's kind of like ADD, like you're losing the hyperactive aspect. And that's one of those things where like you have a very difficult time paying attention to things that don't really pique your interest. However, things that do pique your interest, you can be like go super deep on. So it's one of those really odd things where, for me, for many years, like my whole life, I was like, no, I'm not ADHD, because I have a lot of very specific knowledge where I earned it by going really, really deep for a long time. But can I pay attention to things that happen in systems that other people designed? Like, that is such a difficult thing for me. You know,
Once I get in a zone,
Mm-hmm.
like when I'm doing a schematic design or a board layout or something,
Rob, they're gone. I moved them.
I go all out. Once I get on a roll, I don't want to get knocked off of a roll. So I'll stay in my chair in front of my monitors working that shit until I just can't see straight anymore. And then I'll get up, go outside, walk around the park or something like that, get some oxygen, get some sun on my face, and then I'll go back and do it. So I'll really zero in on that and stay committed to it for as long as I can, because I know I'm going to get knocked off my stride by any number of other things that are going on at work. So I usually try to hang on to a role as long as I can, and then once I get knocked off it, it's almost like I'm glad I got knocked off it, because I wasn't going to stop myself until somebody else came and said, the emergency fire to put out, blah, blah, this.
I can relate, but that's really difficult when you live in a world where, you know, you kind of need to multitask to keep all of your adult responsibilities going. And if you can't afford to have a personal assistant, that gets tricky, because you're super obsessive about one thing. And when you come up for air, you're like, oh, I forgot to do some really important things.
Yeah, I
know?
do that. I absolutely do that.
It sucks. Yeah.
And I go from area to area around the company. I'll specifically stop what I'm doing to go to another part of the building to do a task, which I promptly forget once I get to that area. And then I turn around and I go back to the other area and work, and I went, oh, that's right. And then I zoom back and I repeat to myself what I was going to do. And if anybody interrupts me, like starts to try to talk to me while I'm in transit, I just blow them off and I keep moving until I get that one dumb little task done. You know, follow up on an order, check a specification, whatever it may be. Just
so are you
that,
saying that what happens is where you like you kind of have to coach yourself through not getting off track? Like, okay, I'm going to walk through the company, I'm going to go do this thing, but something's going to happen to knock me off track, so I have to keep kind of telling yourself what the mission is?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I call it NAM syndrome.
Okay.
Where if I leave the booth just to go to the bathroom, I come back an hour and a half later because
you're like, I forgot to go to the bathroom.
Well, somebody,
talked to so-and-so.
I had to talk to this person about this. Hey, I'm going to come over and make an appointment later. Or what's happening with my order? Hey, is that new thing out yet? Or blah 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 blah. Or hey, we need to hook up. Let's get together and talk about an appointment time or something like that. And then somebody else comes by. Hey man, I haven't seen you for a while. And so it's like what, a 150-foot walk to the restroom. that takes an hour and a half round trip
Yeah.
to get done.
Right.
And then when I get back to the booth, it's like, oh, that's right, I was going to grab a sandwich.
Well, these things, and I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not exaggerating. They definitely exaggerate ADHD-like tendencies in adults. If you have it, it can make it worse. If you've never had it before, it can kind of induce those sorts of symptoms.
What, the medication?
No, the phones,
Oh.
you know?
Yeah, I've been reading about the blue
light?
the blue light spectrum.
Oh, that's a
Which-
different thing altogether.
Oh, okay. Rabbit hole after rabbit hole.
Rabbit hole after rabbit hole. Well, it's good to see all you guys. See you popping in. What's happening, John? What's happening, Amanda? What's happening, Tom? Jimmy Ray, Scott, all our friends popping in. How cool.
Oh, and by the way, later on we're going to we compiled some of the comments and questions from the last couple of shows and the last couple of videos. Some of the
The ones that say Fire Joe. We're going to do that this week.
Yeah, right,
Cool.
right. And so we're gonna get to some of those later on,
But not now.
but not now.
Because we're going to talk about... You want to start talking Hiwatt?
Sure.
Okay, well, we can just play some video, and it'll tell most of the story. And why don't we just do that?
Does it include the actual beginning of the story?
Yeah, it does.
All right.
The story starts with me outside of your shop,
Oh, I haven't
talking about
seen
what's
that.
happening.
See, I don't
You're
get to
about
see.
to
I don't
see it
see
now.
everything that Joe prepares, so this is gonna be fun for me too.
Well, you won't hear it because we have the volume down.
Oh, I got to switch.
You got a switch?
I do.
All right. So, please. All right.
Oh, and by the way, to anybody that commented about the guitar level last week, okay, I figured
Solved.
I figured out what that was. Just more stupidity. Just more like, look at all the 9 things I did, but I only actually accomplished 8 of them.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, now for our feature-length presentation.
All right, walking into the Hiwatt shop because Dave Friedman sent over this Hiwatt PA head, this old thing that he wants Steve to convert to a guitar circuit. So we can go in here and check it out before he does the work. See what happens. Dun-dun-dun. Hello. Hello. Oh, hi, Nico-chan. So nice to see you. What do we have here? Oh, look at that. Busy beavers in the shop. What's happening over here?
Oh, just doing a little cleanup on Steve Vai's 292 for his current tour. We're just kind of tweaking it a little bit, cleaning it up.
Oh, is that all?
Just
working on Steve Vai's amp, that's all.
Just checking the bios, trying out some new KT88s we just got to test.
Groovy. And also drinking some coffee.
Always.
Let's do it. So I'm here to check out this freakish Hiwatt that I've heard about. What's the mission, dude? What's going on? Is it?
So.
Oh, whoa! Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute, guys. What the hell is this?
It's a PA 112, I think, is the model number. A 100
Okay.
watt Hiwatt PA head, 4 EL34s. It's basically a DR103 power section with 6 channels, and it's really common if you could find one of these used. What people do is they just gut all the PA part and turn the main chassis part into a DR103.
Oh, okay.
And this belongs to Dave Friedman. When I went over to take his 50 watt 68 plexi back to him after the last show. I was on my way out and he says, "Hey, do you want to work on this?" And I went, "Okay, define work on this." And he's like, put your favorite DR103 circuit in it."
Oh, okay.
And
So that's the mission here?
And I said, "What's up with it now?" And he says, "Well, it's got the Canadian mod." And I go, "Okay, now that's a first for me. I've never heard of the Canadian mod. The only Canadian mod I know
Oh,
of,
that's what's going on here.
yeah, the only Canadian
UK?
mod I've ever heard of is when the Canadian government mandated that 16 ohms wasn't allowed. So if you shipped an amp into the country as new to be sold at retail, it could only have a 4 and 8 ohm output. They couldn't have 16 ohms. Had to do with the output voltage potential that was there at the speaker jack, but it was lame and stupid, and eventually it got repealed. But that's not the Canadian mod, and I've never heard of the Canadian mod. There was an overdrive mod that this company in San Francisco that was making fraudulent Hiwatts in the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s were doing, that was horrible also. So I thought, well, maybe it's that.
Okay.
But I don't know. He just said, I said, "How is it?" And he says, "Well, it's got that Canadian mod, it's got the little," and he described it, and I went, "Okay, well, that sounds like the Bay Area bad overdrive mod."
Okay.
Which is kind of ratty. And he goes, "Yeah, it's kind of ratty."
So you've played this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like with stuff like this. I'm like an animal rescue. I can't let
An animal rescue.
let an abused.
An animal rescue. Okay.
Yeah. I can't
sorry,
let
I said
an abused creature go back out in the world like that,
Right.
So.
Well, let's give it a listen here. All right, let's give this sucker a listen. What am I gonna hear?
Well, I don't remember where I had it set last, so let's just mess around with it.
Okay. Good God, man. You guys hear that? It's like...
Well, so that's the Canadian channel, whatever the hell that means, and then this is the UK channel, whatever the hell that means, and when you're plugged into this jack, both the UK volume and the Canadian volume work together. So
For crying out sakes,
trying
man.
to like turn it up to get a little overdrive.
Well,
No, that's awful.
okay.
Just was push the power amp to get it, maybe help me that.
Leave me alone. That hurts. So that's what it does.
Yeah, that's
In
what
its current state.
Yeah.
And you kind of can't dial it out.
Well,
It's just varying levels of heinous. Okay, so it just seems like there's like no way to dial out the horrible in this.
I mean, okay, so here's cleaner
Okay, so
and
where's
louder.
cleaner?
Push the power amp.
A little louder.
See, that's heinous. If I try to get more overdrive out of it to give it a smoother sound.
You can't smooth it out. We already heard that. Oh my god.
Let's try it all the way.
Okay.
See, with the master volume down is heinous.
It's like.
I don't know, that's almost bearable. I don't know.
No, it's not. It's a Hiwatt ass tone.
I don't know. Well, maybe we should bring in another pair of ears.
Yeah. All right. I think it's horrible. You think it's horrible.
I think this is almost passable if you play it loud enough.
Well, how about that?
All right, so we have Nico-chan here.
All right, Nico-chan.
Now, Nico-chan has got especially sensitive ears.
Hello, everybody.
And a great sense of tone. So let's see what Nico-chan thinks.
All right.
I'm gonna crank this a little bit. Hopefully that helps.
All right, mighty E chord again. Here we go. Nico-chan, check this out.
That's a diarrhea sound.
High five, Nico-chan.
Yeah.
We share the same opinion.
Yeah, it's
So this needs some help, right, Nico-chan?
it's
Yes.
You've heard of-
Need a big help on this sound.
you've heard of tonal nirvana. This is tonal diarrhea.
It is really diarrhea coming out of my ass, and I can't believe it. It's so bad.
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
Well, should we throw it up on the bench and take a look at it
Um,
before you get into it and do your magic?
I want to try two more things.
Okay.
I want to see if the power station helps it at all,
Ah,
and then I want to compare it to the
a little bit of science.
unknown good sounding amp.
Okay, science
So-
guy, let's do this.
So, go ahead.
Okay, so what are we listening to now? So now it's still,
I've turned it up all the way.
okay.
I've maxed out the master volume. The settings are pretty much the same, although I turned the presence up a little bit to get. I don't know why I just did that. I just usually do, but and then do the power station out of.
Okay, Nico-chan, we're gonna listen to it. E-chord time. Ready?
Alright.
Here we go. Well.
That's better.
Yeah, it's a little. Well, it's compressed diarrhea now, which is probably preferable to.
Yeah. Now it's just channeled down the pipes.
Yeah.
A bit better.
Well, when Dave said this thing was a little ratty sounding, I think he was. Being.
I think he was setting you up.
I
what
think
he
it's
was
no
doing.
total setup, absolutely. Okay, so if I turn the channel gain down, and then with the volume, and then we turn this up a little more, still with power station on, try that.
Okay, ready, Nico-chan?
Yes.
Here we go. Okay.
That's
Actually, that's a
almost
little
usable.
better.
Better. Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Wow. That's actually interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
I didn't know that could happen.
Well, one good way to get bad Hiwatt preamp distortion out of the way is to get the preamp gain down and turn the power amp all the way up so that power amp distortion predominates,
And it's kind of rounding things
and it
off.
rounds things out. Now, like I said, this has got a DR103 power section in it, which is good sounding. It's not the best iteration of it that I've heard, but
Okay.
the mission is to put the best, what I consider the best iteration in it, and but that won't be the majority of the work that I'm going to do on this. The majority of the work is going to be the version that I think that whoever did this mod, the version of preamp they use, looks like late 70, early 80, which is the one that's it's noted for its harshness and blocking distortion because it doesn't have it doesn't have the grid stopper resistors on the grids of the input stages. So when you push them up, and on the input stage, so when you push them up, you hear that really gacked out, hideous fizz.
So this has been kind of nasty for quite a while.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
So now compare that to this.
all right. So now we're going to listen to what's this model?
This is the
04?
DR504.
So this is a DR504 in great shape,
Yeah.
and we're listening to this through the power station.
And this will be my normal settings. It's up there. That's while I'm all the way up, and I'm turning the power station off now. So let's hear that.
Okay, so this is DR504
Yeah, this is the 50 watt
non-power station, and
Yeah, this is a 1972. It's like
we played this amp on the show too, guys.
this is as far as I'm concerned the ideal
Okay.
preamp configuration.
All right, E chord magic. Here we go. Ready?
Yep.
Okay.
See, there's no comparison there. Even with the presence turned all the way up on this, it's got the roundness and the thump on the bottom.
Yeah, and that really cacophonous top end raspy thing isn't present at all.
Right.
There's none of that.
Right. Now, the DR103 power amp has got that big hi-fi output transformer in it. It has more headroom and more dynamic range than the output transformer in this one. It's just a broader.
It's gonna be that.
It's got more bottom end and more brightness and a lot of brightness compared to a typical like 100-watt Marshall output transformer. So the slightest uglies in the front end of it are going to be accentuated by the power amp section just because of the output transformer.
All right. So would that happen even if we took the preamp section of this amp and like somehow Frankenstein these together?
It will. Well, we're going to get rid of the real nasty stuff that's caused by blocking distortion. Okay. That was
We had no sound over there?
yeah, I fixed it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. That was yeah. You guys are killing us out there with the Nico Chubb con. Yeah. So yeah, you know, honestly, listening back to that, honestly, I just don't think we did a very good job of putting across how absolutely heinous this thing sounded in that room. It's the iPhone compressor and probably the compression.
Oh, and I had to do so much to like get the our speaking to sort of match that. Like this is a bad.
I mean, what you can hear, what I can hear, if what I'm hearing is what you're hearing right now, what I can hear is that it just sounds congested and ratty.
But it doesn't do.
But it doesn't do justice to the pain, the ice pick in the fucking eyeballs pain.
Like not knowing what the hell I'm talking about. To me, it was like the harmonics and the upper mids were just like it sounds completely out of order.
Yeah, well,
like
I think Nico
was cacophonous.
First of all, Nico-chan's got very sensitive hearing. She's really got great hearing, and
that's no joke, by the way.
And especially high frequencies. She just like goes nuts when she hears these upper harmonics, probably that most people don't hear, but they just make her bananas. And that whole screaming diarrhea diatribe she did was genuine. It was painful in there. You see me squinting? That wasn't a joke. That was painful. Well, and we weren't able to really, I don't think, translate that.
Well, what's kind of funny is
pain across on tape. But
well, you know, I have a guitar there, and it's like, okay, let's play. And I think the first thing I did was I played a chord. Like I couldn't play anything else. I didn't want to play anything else. Like go up the neck.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't.
No.
It's almost like you should have gone up and played bent up a high note so you could just really hear how.
If I'd done that, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, well, it was
really bad. It was really bad. But the 504, the DR504 was great.
Well,
and I think you could kind of hear that.
In comparison to here right now, what I don't really hear the difference in that painful, like breaking your eyeglasses treble, ear splitting treble. The difference I really hear after it's been recorded and processed is that, like you said, and I think some of you guys commented too, the harmonics all sound like they're in the right place now, and
That's what I've been saying all along.
yeah,
what I heard.
that's
So before we go on, because the clip ended with this, and I think it's really important, can you explain for the dummies in the room what blocking distortion is?
it's actually a little bit of a misnomer, but
Scott, bingo. Sounded like a twin. Is that an actual pedal? A screaming
a
bird?
screaming bird. Oh yeah.
Yeah, anything, yeah.
Isn't the screaming bird the treble booster?
Oh.
Hey,
That's basically
Carlos.
what it
Carlos. Hey.
Yeah, but blocking distortion, sorry.
If you put enough signal into a triode or into a pentode or any tube or in any circuit for that matter, if you can send it enough drive signal to cause the tube to be driven into cutoff. And what cutoff means is just exactly what it sounds like. The tube the amplification will increase until you get up to the cutoff threshold, and then it'll just stop. It'll turn off. It'll stop amplifying because it's completely, fully, totally saturated to where the grid just turns into a on-off switch. So some things cause blocking distortion, too much bass response for one thing.
Okay. That's not what the deal was with that amplifier.
Well, there was some of that. It's hard to hear because it's sort of masked by how much low-end rumble there is coming out of the power amp stage, which is enormous. But the other thing is when you drive a signal into a triode, it can develop oscillation. So you'll put a resistor in series with the signal going into the grid, and that effectively raises the input impedance, and the tube has capacitance inside. When you effectively raise the input impedance, the tube's natural capacitance inside, it's called Miller effect, will roll off that high frequency response out there in the upper reaches of beyond your hearing range actually, is where all this is occurring. And when it does occur, it affects the subharmonics below it. It affects the operation of the tube. So those two things make the tube sound really, really harsh when there's parasitic oscillations in there, and not when you're hitting block and distortion where you're actually hitting cutoff, but just below the threshold of cutoff, it's starting to get ready to go into cutoff, and it just sounds heinous.
Ugh.
Now, at some point along the way, David Rees decided that you didn't really need what's called the grid stopper resistors, the resistors that sort of ameliorate that effect on triodes, for God knows what reason. The later model of amps had more headroom in the power stage, and perhaps they wanted it to be cleaner, louder, longer, and he wasn't really interested in amplifier distortion, so get it as clean and loud as possible, and with some high frequency, articulation in there. Eliminating the stopping resistors could affect that, increase the high frequency response of the preamp stages. But the negative side was that everybody's trying to turn the amp up. It's got a master volume. The master volume on Hiwatts isn't really what people normally associate with the activity of a master volume. So what you end up with is just this thing that over time it just became the lesser model of amp sonically. Like the two input 1980 DR103s, the two input ones. This whole idea that it's a clean platform, well, they're good.
Yeah.
They're
that
better
was the
because
first
they're
thing
clean
I ever heard.
But they're
Hiwatt.
just too hi-fi and they're too brittle sounding. The really good sounding ones are in the early to mid 70s.
Okay.
And particularly the 70 to 72 in my humble opinion.
Grab your drink. Amanda, this is Laphroaig 10.
Man,
And it's been a minute since I've had scotch, and Laphroaig 10 is kind of my home base, so I'm very, very happy right now. And Tom, I was born in Pittsburgh, man. Maybe we actually talked about that before. But I know all about the Iron City
Well, at any rate,
diarrhea.
the 50 sounds particularly good because it doesn't exhibit that parasitic oscillation and blocking distortion, no matter how much you turn up the controls. Number one. Number two, it's only a 50-watt amp, so the output transformer saturates easier, so more easily. So it gets a richer harmonic,
Right.
balance
That's
and
pretty
compression,
easy to
natural
hear.
compression. And you could hear that really well in the last show next to Dave's JMP50. That had a little bit more mid-range saturation, but both of them, you really could just hear what the different basic personality of Hiwatt versus Marshall when they're used when they're set up parity, when they're set up
Yeah.
to
Basically
where
doing the exact
where
same
people
thing.
don't think that you normally would set a Hiwatt up, which is cranked, and so you could hear that they could get the same amount of gain, basically saturation, low nth up and stuff. It was just the harmonic balance between the two is different, the mids and the highs. So that's what the blocking distortion is, and this exercise was revolved around getting rid of anything in the amplifier that would contribute to these parasitic oscillations and funny, unpleasant high frequency characteristics.
Well, let's look at the amp when you kind of gave it the once over before you worked on it.
All right.
Okay, sound good?
Okay.
All right, guys, be back in a few.
All right, so there she blow, and so what's going on in there?
There's a few things. The phase inverter has been messed with, but everything on this board is not going to be like a DR103 board because was a PA head.
Okay.
So all the components were arranged so that, you see that there's 2 extra tube sockets in here. So that's 4 sockets for the preamp stages. That's 8 channels.
Whew.
So 1 triode per input channel.
Okay.
So each of those was treated identically. So there would have been 8 sets of components up to about here that were related to the preamp input stages, and then you've got the phase inverter over here,
That's beautiful.
which would normally be stock, but somebody messed around with it. They modified it. I think what they did was, if you look at the front panel, it had a master volume and presence here, but that was changed to mid and presence, and this is the master volume. So they moved everything over a notch to put
That beautiful Canadian
this
channel in there.
muckety muck. Okay, so coming off of the input jacks, there's the grid bias resistors going to ground, which is correct.
Okay.
But it on a typical, even a 2 input, but on a typical 4 input, there's the 68K grid stopper resistors that are in series with the input signal.
Okay.
And there's one for each jack, and there's 4 of them, so that when you're using the low jacks, you're going through 68K, and when you use the high jacks, they go in parallel, and you've got 33K. In either case, you've got a grid resistor in between the input jack and the grid, the input grid of each triode. This doesn't have that. That allows the grid to bias sort of unnaturally and overload the grid with incoming signal to the point where you get blocking distortion. And blocking distortion really is just the onset of cutoff. Now, when you drive a tube to cutoff, you put so much signal into it that it just stops amplifying. It
And that's
cuts
what
off.
we're hearing in that nasty,
That
crazy
nasty
artifact
fizz is the onset of cutoff. And then in the next stage after that, the bright and normal volume controls normally have 470K resistors coming off of the wipers of the pot and then blending together to go into the next stage.
Okay.
This is wired like these are wired like a 1980 Hiwatt, which had a separate volume control and a separate triode for each volume control with no 470K. The leads, the wiper of each pot went directly to the grid of the subsequent stage. So the pot performed the grid bias function and the grid stopper function, but only when the volumes were down low. If you turned them all the way up, then there's no grid stopper in there, and it would start oscillating and pushing it close to cutoff again, and then you get more of that rattiness. So this has got two opportunities in each channel to get into that really ratty blocking distortion territory. And then I haven't really gotten into which version of DR103 the phase inverter is on here, but looking down here, I can see there's a 1 meg there, there's a 1 meg there, and I'm just guessing that this is a later phase inverter that's got a little bit higher gain, and we don't need higher gain. What we need is the ability to do a full right hand sweep and get this nice
bring
round
the
rich
power section
sound.
in. Yeah.
And the earlier version of the DR103 does that. I've got all the schematics that you see online everywhere. I've got all of the different variations of Hiwatt schematics here, but I also have a variation that isn't online or available anywhere. And this is a hand-drawn one I did in the 80s based on my favorite 50 that I had at that time.
Oh, wow.
And it is a little bit different than all the DR103s and all the DR504s on the schematics that you see online. Just slightly different. But it's got the grid stopper on the input. It's got the mixing network, which serves as grid stoppers to the next stage, and no bypass cap on the next input stage. And a couple other little tricks that I'm not going to reveal here right now. But
can we show this?
yeah. Let somebody that is like really curious is try to zoom in on it and figure it out, and they can have some fun with that. But that
Easter egg.
those circuits, it's not that those circuits aren't used anywhere. They're just not specifically used in that particular combination in a 504 or a 103.
Got it.
Although both the 103 and the 504s that I've had in the past were wired that way. So there's a period in there between 70 and 72 where they were wired this particular way, and that's not represented in most of the schematics you see online. Parts of the circuit are represented on the Michael Huss site, the hiwatt.org site, where they have that big trove of Hiwatt schematics. But you have to go through every single one of them and get the schematic from this one version, this one model, or the preamp from this one, and put them together.
So Steve wanted to take a break there. Are we unmuted over there?
Yeah.
We're unmuted over here?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, thanks for your kind comments.
And Tom, I'm going to talk about Joe Negri in a minute, but first.
And am I pokey now, or am I pokey in the video?
You were pokey in the video.
Oh.
You're playing xylophone.
And by the
with
way, that's the iPhone. I'm barely even touching this stuff, but it sounds like I'm just bashing everything with my probes because the compression in the iPhone video is making it sound like I'm really bashing parts. I'm not really. I'm barely touching them, but it is obnoxious. I was cracking up while I was watching it along with you guys. The thing about the circuit version, which is really interesting, is something I stumbled across accidentally. That this particular combination, every time I played a Hiwatt, that I went, oh, it's great, Well,
it was inspiring enough for you to write that shit down.
Right. Every time I've had one that I just played an E chord and it went karang the right way, when I opened it up, it had that circuit in it. And every other one that I played that didn't karang didn't have the circuit topology exactly like that. And so what's really interesting to me about that is there's probably what, 2 or 3 or 4 different companies that are making Hiwatt clones that the common refrain is a faithful reproduction, but if it's a faithful reproduction based on the schematics that are commonly available, most of the stuff that you see that's online or was written down, and there's a bunch of schematics that were written hand-drawn by David Rees in 1979. I have a whole book of them. And the bottom right, it says DR 1979.
Really?
Yeah. And those are all later versions. And then on the Mark Huss site, there's earlier versions that are not documented in the Hiwatt package that I'd gotten a couple of over the years. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, I went to the NAMM show and I got they made me the West Coast, the Southern California official Hiwatt warranty station, gave me a package of schematics. I still have that. And then in the 2000s, when Fernandez was doing it, they couldn't effectively oversee they didn't know what they were doing with the amps that they were selling. They needed somebody to advise them and consult with them about warranty service and which circuits they were and blah 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 blah. They gave me the package that they had, and it was mostly the same package that I got originally from Hiwatt in 79 or 80, and again 79 era schematics. And then there's the hiwatt.org site, the Huff site, that has a lot of variations where they nicely documented the variations that they were able to observe. And there's elements of each of those circuits in different models of amps, but not all of them in one particular model.
Sure.
These particular amps made between 70 and 72. And I always thought, okay, so the whole concept of the faithful reproduction of
See, this is malcontent.
yeah,
right
well,
here.
I mean, I can sort of relate to that because I mean we have sort of this. I have sort of the same thing. I see it from time to time. There was somebody said when they're selling one of our older model amps on eBay, and they'll say, "This one was personally hand built by me by Stevie Fryette," and it's just like,
yeah, that whole thing.
That's baloney,
Yeah.
and. Or specially modified by me for so-and-so, that's baloney. And so I can sort of relate to that when people say, people that are not that knowledgeable about the history, they may have access to the name, they may have access to the assets, and they may have, they may own the trademarks, but they don't know historically where all these bits of peoples fall. And I'm not trying to brag that I'm like the big know-it-all of Hiwatt of all time. It's just been my passion for the longest time.
So I wanted to ask you,
Please.
when you were made, an official repair station for Hiwatt, you had to have had some feelings about that, like, oh, this is super cool, right?
Well, I was. Well, yeah. I mean, there was a certain part of it that was. It was exciting. Well, of course, I had just started working in a shop where I was surrounded by, like, real name guitar players all the time. That was cool. And then,
Yeah.
once the word got around that I was sort of a Hiwatt nut, the Hiwatt nuts would come out of the woodwork. And then I saw some really horrible abominations. You'd see Hiwatts with Marshall output transformers in them because they couldn't get a replacement Hiwatt output transformer because they didn't have a warranty repair station or even a non-warranty repair station where you could order parts. So when they said, okay, we're going to make you the Southern California official repair station for Hiwatt, what do you need? I need all the schematics, and I need a set of output transformers and a set of power transformers for each of the models that you sell into the U.S. and some filter caps and some this and that, impedance selectors, power switches, the things that usually break. And just because I said filter capacitors and then I said things that usually break, you don't get to plug those two things together because a brand new capacitor could eat it in
You actually talked
manufacturing.
about that in this video when we stopped it. You actually had a little bit where you talked about that at the end.
Yeah, well, but so I'm just heading that shit off at the pass right now. I just want to let you know. But there would be a reason. Within the warranty, a brand new amp, if you have a defective component like a resistor or a capacitor or a bad solder joint or blah 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 blah, yes, you would want those parts.
Of course.
Or in the case where you actually do have a filter capacitor that fails and you can measure it and you can see it and you can put it on the scope and oh look, you can measure that it failed. Of course, you would replace it. But I digress. I never saw.
Don't digress.
I never saw a reproduction Hiwatt made the way these are made, and they are a distinctively different experience to play them.
Do you feel like the sorts of tones that you were drawn to draw out of your own Hiwatts is different than most of the Hiwatt gang?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So you're like going down another path.
Well, I think that
Than
a
most
lot
of
of
the
people
Hiwatt
that were
people.
just playing Hiwatts that, like, I wish I could get it to sound more like a Marshall. Maybe there was a time when Hiwatts were a lot cheaper to buy, and they looked cool.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Townsend uses them, so and so uses them, the Faces used them, and Tommy Bolin, all the great players that played Hiwatts, got really good sounds out of them, did great things with them.
Yeah.
Gilmore, of course, and all of that. So there's that, but there are also there's also a characteristic about it that I learned about overdrive and about gain and about saturation and about power amp distortion and output transfer. I learned all those things by running up against what was distinctively different about a Hiwatt. And I had to sort of, I had to dissect all of that to understand what it was, besides the malcontent part where it's just like, fuck you, I've got this, it's different than what you got.
Yeah.
And I don't want to play what you're playing.
Yeah.
And that sort of contrarian attitude. Because beyond all of that, I learned a lot about how I want to sound and the way I want my amplifier to sound and all that. I learned all that from digging deep into the Hiwatt topology, and so yeah, I'm steeped in it, and yeah, I'm probably too anal retentive about it, and on a big bent, waving the flag all the time and stuff like that. But still, but the people that are making the reproductions are missing it because they don't really get. In my estimation, by listening to what I've listened to, I'm not trying to criticize any particular company. I'm just saying when I play those, and then I go, you missed it. Don't you have like an original one where you sit it side by side and you listen to the two and one of them goes kerrang and just like drives itself right into your head and your heart, and then the other one you play it and it just goes keek boom, and doesn't do any of that. It's a jaw dropper to me.
Hey, Quentin, you see what he said? That VHT Pittbull rack head is killing me. Talk about that, man. Because,
Let's see. Say what?
well, we're
VHT
talking about this Hiwatt
rack
PA head.
Oh,
Look at it, right?
right.
And then look at the Nelson Pittbull.
Well, see, that didn't really occur to me until I was playing around with it this week,
Oh, okay.
that I went,
Same.
I must have seen that. It was all subliminal, Quentin. It wasn't, I'm not going to say that I was influenced by that to come up with that. All I'll say is after we left the shop today, when I did the final bits and pieces of the modification to the PA head, I was just thinking, this had to have subliminally affected me in order to make it look like that. I mean, a big part of it was I had a Formica guy that his whole business was making these engraved panels. And so I had a panel made like that, but that's just a brittle piece of plastic that can, Formica, whatever it is, can break easily, and it certainly wouldn't support a chassis.
Yeah.
So I had to take that and then support the back of it with an 1/8-inch thick sheet of aluminum, and that's what that is. And this also has, and we'll see it in a minute.
But
the,
hold on.
the PA 100 head also has a layer of sheet metal behind the Formica panel to support all the knobs and so on.
I'm just going to give.
But that was designed to rack and sit in a
Sure.
head. It wasn't designed to be rack mounted.
I'm just going to say that we did an episode where we talked all about that head in season 1 of the Malcontents. The whole story behind that sucker. I will. Can I go back and do that when this is over? If I can, I will put a link underneath the stream of this video with the episode that we're talking about. So if you wanted to learn more about that head, you can.
So what was this? Hey, I just have a little quick question about the Braxton. What's the Sound City comment? I don't really understand that comment. So could you let me know what it is you're asking there or commenting? I don't get it.
So, Steve, you have Dave's Hiwatt over here. You want to slide over there and talk about what you did when you got under the hood?
Yeah,
And we'll do that now?
we can do that.
All right. Look at that!
Okay, so I don't have a test probe handy so that I can make all those clickety clackety sounds that you guys all
Chopsticks. Whoa!
And oh yeah, I told myself, be really careful not to hit that flaky tripod. And then I hit the flaky tripod. And now I just fixed it. So,
That's straight up malcontents.
all right, so what I said I was going to do was address the input stages, which is over here, and the phase inverter stage, which is over here. And we didn't play the rest of the video, but I also made mention of this bias circuit modification. And I said I was going to take it out because it was a superfluous mess.
We'll put that whole video out, by the way.
That'll be in the video. But I got pressed for time, and so I didn't go there. I was really mainly concerned with what version whoever did this modification to this amp thought that they were trying to accomplish. And it seemed to me that it was a late 70s, early 80s version because of the variation that they'd done on the phase inverter and the fact that they had, it's hard to see here, but you can see in the previous video where there were no grid stopper resistors on the input jacks over here, and there were no grid stoppers on the mixing stage over here, where the bright and normal volume controls mix together and feed into that next stage. There was an additional gain stage added there that there was the input stage that goes right to the grids of the first two stages.
Uh-huh.
Gonna sound ratty because the grid stopper resistors aren't there. The very next stage, which is the mixing of the volume controls into that trial stage there, gonna sound ratty because the mixing resistors are gone. It feeds directly into the triode off of the volume controls.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna make it, actually with the volume controls turned down a little bit, that'll sort of ameliorate the rattiness.
But when you turn everything up, that's the blocking distortion
But
thing,
if you
right?
turn everything up to try to get it to
Because there's no dam in place. You're just like
yeah,
hitting the
if
tube
you,
like...
if you're turning it up to try to get it to roar a little bit, you're basically just making sure that it sounds its worst,
Yeah.
right? And then the phase inverter stage, the 7980 phase inverter stage, they treated it a little differently. It's not,
Amanda's having to like police these boys.
the phase inverter is a two-part affair. One part of it is the phase inverter, and just before the phase inverter, there is a reference voltage cathode follower that sets the bias on the phase inverter stage, and the signal actually flows through it.
Mm-hmm.
The later version, that voltage reference is applied to the grid of the phase inverter, but the signal goes around that part of the circuit. It doesn't go through it.
Uh-huh.
And so it actually, the older version of the phase inverter actually limits the headroom a little bit and gives you this more cascading saturation.
Okay.
Whereas the later one eliminates some of that and by extension exacerbates the brittleness of the prior stages. So
Right.
it's like we're gonna make it sound brittle here, and then we're gonna add some more brittle here, and then this stage would have ameliorated some of that, but we're gonna take that out and make that cleaner too, so that you can hear the double brittleness that happened before more.
Double brittleness.
And yeah, it's
The Hiwatt double brittle.
so. All I did was roll it back. Now rolling back all of that is really easy if somebody had done that to a DR103, but this is, like I said, it's a PA 100. And so...
But is the whole power section a DR103?
The whole power section is a DR103.
Okay.
And the tag board, the terminal board, is the same terminal board, but all the components that are laid out on it were done for the PA amp. So they're spaced differently and they're positioned slightly differently. So it isn't just a matter of undoing some component changes and putting it back to stock. There was a lot of things that were changed just because it was as a result of the way it was originally built. Trying to turn it into a DR103, and then not necessarily the best version that could have been done. So that's what took me longer. And then the bias circuit, somebody put in the voltage doubler bias circuit that everybody says you have to have that in there because the new power tubes can't handle the plate voltage of the older amps.
You sound like you're not a fan of that.
I'm not. It's
I'm
bull.
reading your tone.
Look, I like I said in the previous show, I like 35 milliamps. I like the EL34s to idle at 35 milliamps. The factory fixed setting of the bias circuit in the 504 and the 103 is 35 milliamps. And that's all there is to it. The tubes idle just fine. They can handle a plate voltage just fine if you don't bias them too hot so that the total dissipation of the tubes is higher than it should be. They'll operate just fine. So I've actually, the power tubes that are in there right now, those are the RFTs, used RFTs, heavily used RFTs from 1992, 93. And we've been beating them for like the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, watch, one of them will sort of fail.
Well, you want to tell the story about right before we went on? And
Well, this
504?
this one has got original Mullards in it.
Does?
It did.
It did.
And as we're getting ready to go,
let's see, we're an hour and 15 minutes in, so
Yeah.
what? An hour and... Remember when we said we were going to go on late?
yeah, we turned on the 50 and it started making this hum, and I go, either I got a ground loop or a power tube went bad. I look in the back, and one of the tubes is just glowing bright orange, and I'm like going,
Shit.
I've been pounding on this thing for the past month cranked all the way up into an attenuator, and it's been fine, but
Yeah.
it finally gave up a tube, so I had to throw in a pair too. So what I'd put in was a brand new pair of Mullers, and I just threw them in. I didn't open the chassis. I didn't check the bias. I didn't do anything. I just threw them in, and so that's what we're gonna mess around with today. Oh, and because I was kind of under the gun finishing this, a couple of things are going on with this amp. It only has 2 input jacks. I have to talk to Dave before I drill holes in that front panel because it's the same chassis as the DR103.
It's the exact same chassis.
It's just the panel.
So if you took that panel off, it's the exact same chassis.
Yeah, you could put a DR103 front panel on it and it would be a DR103. So it's got the 4-hole chassis on it, but in order to put 4 jacks on there, I would have to drill holes in that existing panel. I didn't want to do that unless I talked to Dave.
He'd
And
have to
about
get
the bias
another-
circuit, I was going to take the bias circuit out and do another little trick for Dave, which would be putting a switch. So in one position, actually I was going to make a 3-position switch. He likes 30 milliamps. I was going to have a
that's
switch for
right.
30 milliamps, a switch for 35 milliamps, and a switch for 50 milliamps so he could run it with a variac.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was going to do that, but then I ran out of time. And then on top of that, I was trying to come up with a quickie way to make a 2-input amp behave like a 4-holer jacked together. And as a result of that, the grid stopper resistors are a little larger than they normally would be when the jacks are all jacked together. So the gain isn't quite as hot and saturated as it would be if I had
Saturatized?
Yeah, well, that was just like one of those things at the very last minute. Okay, it's working. It's all doing what it's supposed to do. It sounds great. I've got the channels ganged together, but still, it'll have a little tiny extra bit of nice, rich sounding zhuzh if I had done the 4-hole arrangement. It would have sounded just a little bit better. But I mean, we're nitpicking, as you will see shortly when we start banging on it. Other than that, the great thing about this amp is this is what I always find with amplifiers that have been modded. People that mod amplifiers most of the time, they're fine to go messing around in the preamp stages. They stay away from the power section. That's where all the big voltages, that's where all the monsters live. You know, you can tell people stay away from the power amps because they don't understand the power amps. They're afraid of the power amps, and thank God they are. You know, because they don't really understand.
What's your okay? This is a total. What do I want to say? Scenic overlook. It's a scenic overlook. You're stopping for a moment. What's your best story about having the shit shocked out of you working on amps? Do you have any good ones?
Yeah, I've told that story enough times.
On here?
I think so.
I don't think so.
Well, I'll tell you.
Well, you know what? It's season 2, man.
Okay. Well, I'll tell it to you, and then you'll go, "Oh yeah."
Well, I remember, but I thought they might like to hear.
Well.
Our friends who are over here talking about Viagra in the chat. Man,
Yeah.
look, we're missing all the good stuff. Rubbing 100 feet on 100. What is happening over here, guys? So, getting the shit shocked out of you.
Well, hey, it's not bias be damned. It's set the bias where the guy that designed it, the famous guy whose name is on the front of the amp that designed it, setting it where he said it should be.
Mr. Hiwatt?
The whole thing about the new tubes can't handle the plate voltage that the old ones can is crap. I just love that old Saturday Night Live thing.
Mm-hmm.
If it is Goyish, it's crap. I love that.
It's true.
Anyway, it's not bias be damned. It's run the tubes the way they're designed to be run. And if one fails, it's because it
Wait a
wasn't made
minute,
well.
man. Shock story.
All right. You saw at the beginning of the interim video that Joe played when I was working on Steve Vai's 292 power amp. One day, I was testing a 292 power amp. This was a long time ago, probably 95.
5 minutes ago.
And I always have this rule that nobody's supposed to talk to me when I'm testing. And somebody came up and started asking me a bunch of questions, and I said, I'm testing, don't bother me right now. Blah, it's just a quick question, blah, 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 blah. And I grabbed the chassis where I normally would not put my hand on the chassis, and I was holding a test lead in my hand, and it slipped, and my fingers touched the tip of the probe. And so I was grounded. With my left hand was grounded, and my right hand was holding this probe that had 700 volts on it. And I lit up like a Christmas tree. And normally when I get a shock, I just do this so that I let everything
You're free.
go.
Yeah.
But
Isn't it, doesn't the shock do this?
well, that's the natural tendency, is to do that. So
Yeah.
whenever I get a shock, I've trained myself to do this. Let go.
Okay.
Immediately step back.
Yeah.
It was such a high voltage and current that the probe had melted into my skin and stuck there already. So when I went like this, it didn't come loose.
Oh.
So I was doing this little dance like this until it finally broke loose. And then when it broke loose, I was thrown backwards against the wall behind me, and I was sitting on the floor dazed. When I looked up from where on the floor where I was sitting, I looked up, I was looking at my workbench, and what I saw was me from behind doing this. I was having a total out-of-body experience. Wow. I swear to God, I saw myself dancing and going whoop, 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 while I was sitting on the floor half dazed with my back against the wall.
Okay, I'm glad I pressed you on that, because that's a good-ass story.
I still get a little shocked regularly, but
Steve Vai almost killed Steve. For the love of God, I see what you did there. That's a good one, man. Points for you.
yeah, I actually still have a little scar on
Serious?
this finger from where you can
I'll
see.
be damned, yeah.
See that little light
That's
spot.
for real.
That's where the probe.
Well, you know what's funny is I have a similar one here that came from lighting, butterflies, those fireworks that go.
Oh yeah.
Well, I used to when I was a kid, not as an adult, I used to grab them by the fuse, light them, and throw that shit, right? Only this fuse got me really fast and burned, it embedded the fuse in my finger. And the thing is my friends and I had snuck out in the middle of the night. So that's a pretty bad burn, because I'm old now and it's still embedded in my finger. But because we snuck, I couldn't go, I must have been 10, 11, and I couldn't go say, Mom, Dad, I need help, because we snuck out, man. So I'm just running over to this, the water fountain in the middle of the park at 2:30 in the morning, dousing it, but I still remember how bad it hurt. Rob wins the internet? Of course. Do you and Rob have any fun stories from when you guys used to work together?
Me and who?
You and Rob?
Funny stories?
Yeah.
Do I have a funny story, Rob? We didn't really.
Oh, I know Rob will have funny stories about you. I'm sure about that.
I don't know if there was any real funny story stuff. It was more like, it was kind of a short tenure, and I was just developing the Sound City at the time.
Oh, okay, all right.
And Rob, I don't think you had any sort of background or feel for the Hiwatt thing, and so he got a chance to see my method.
Rob says his most memorable moment going to John's studio in the hills. Is that John Shanks, I'm assuming?
That was fun. That was probably John Shank's studio when we went over to borrow a couple of his Hiwatt / Sound City.
Oh, cool.
Very early pre-production amps.
Cool.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, he's got an
I
amp
think
or two.
I think I was telling Rob that I had a vision of what the Sound City was going to be, and that it was going to that it was going to be developed from the pre-Sound City David Reeves platform that he had created for Sound City, and that eventually became has Hiwatt, and then it evolved into the later Hiwatts that everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I told him that this was going to be my objective. This is what I intended to do. The Sound City 100 was, I liked the sound of it, and it was very raw, and it had this just sort of just this rough and ready, you know what I'm talking about. It just had this raw, unleashed quality to it. And I think I told Rob that my feeling about the behavior of Hiwatts, and its, by extension the behavior of this early Sound City, was that it was like a gorilla with all these handcuffs and straitjacket
Did
on
John
it.
own the Sound City that we played, the one that we always talk about with the one usable sound?
Yeah.
That was his amp?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think I characterized the sound of those amps as like a gorilla in a straitjacket with handcuffs. And what I intended to do was not let the gorilla out, but take off one of the handcuffs and loosen up the straitjacket.
Oh.
That's the way I
interesting.
characterized it to him, that I wanted to release the beast a little bit, but not to the extent that it was out of control, but just to the extent that it would exhibit this open characteristic.
But it would be usable.
But it would be usable, ultimately usable.
Mhm.
And the problem
That's
with
exactly what you did.
early Hiwatts, not so great with strats unless you boost them a little bit and turn them all the way up. And the early Sound City, by the same token, of the 4 inputs, and this is the 103, the CP 103, whatever the version is, the CP version with the 4 volumes and the 4 inputs, and each input has its own volume.
Yeah.
Of those 4, one of them was useful, and the other 3 were garbage.
Okay, but it was only useful. Well, I remember we were playing strats.
Right.
Neck pickup. Clean. Gorgeous. It's the Hey Joe lead sound.
Yeah.
That's the sound.
Yeah.
And it's fucking gorgeous.
Yeah.
And that amp can't do anything else.
And you
that's
switch to
usable.
the bridge pickup, and it's just like,
go home.
stop, ow, ow.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, that was my goal. And Rob, you were kind of like, oh, okay, I understand what you're saying, and blah, 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 blah. And then when I showed you what I had done with the platform that I was working on, and I showed it to you, and then you played it, and you said to me, you did exactly what you described that you were going to do in advance. Like, you knew exactly where you were going. And I was like, well, yeah. That's when you here's this, we're always kind of open so you could fiddle with the circuit components, routing. Yeah, I had a vision that it was going to go from here to here, and it took a little bit of time to get it to morph from this point to that point, and there were a couple of iterations of that. And you had to play it with a Strat, you had to play it with a humbucker guitar, a Les Paul, a Hamer, and yeah,
Dude, you're a funny man.
Yeah. So because I really understood what was going on in what I considered the best iteration of the Hiwatt, and that it still needed to go somewhere, I postulated that if I had been David Reeves and I had stuck with Sound City instead of having a falling out with Sound City and starting another company and moving on and sticking to my guns on clean, loud.
Yeah.
If I had just evolved the original platform into not necessarily focusing on how loud and how clean, but its overall usefulness with different instruments, then this is the amp that would result from that, and that's what became the new Sound City.
I think that you killed that mission. I'll never
felt
forget
very-
when you had me over to play
Yeah,
the prototype of the Master 100 and just goosebumps. man. It rearranged my
I felt
DNA.
I felt that was a fun. Well, it was a fun exercise, and it was nice to have it sort of vindicated by some players that would listen to it and just go, "Oh, I kind of see what you did there," you know. And that was really the goal, is just to just take an idea, like Rob says, take the grain of an idea and make the thought experiment, create the thought experiment, and then follow through on it. And the thing that was freeing about it for me was that I didn't have to think about the way I normally think about the designs of the stuff we do, because there's switching functions and there's more versatility and blah blah blah. This was going to be strictly a sort of a one directional, and I don't want to say one trick pony, because it has a little more versatility than a typical amp that it sprung from, but it was just that pick any guitar in the room and plug it into it and make good music with that.
Yeah.
So that was really the thought experiment, and
You know
and
what, though?
and that this amp would do that, and the Sound City gave me the freedom to do that, because if I tried to modify somebody's Hiwatt, then somebody would say, well, yeah, but that's not exactly a Hiwatt anymore, is it? And so I was able to sort of roll the clock back, do it on a platform called Sound City, and then take that forward and have people go, yeah, it's kind of like, I see where the Sound City thing kind of was on a parallel track to the Hiwatt thing, and how it influenced your thinking about how your amp should sound. And exactly, that was kind of like a piece of the puzzle that I was able to create, because I had the opportunity and the freedom to not be too hung up on what people would think of a Hiwatt amp having these sort of, what would be by comparison, sort of limited
You know
kind of
what?
feature set.
What's interesting to me about the Sound City stuff is that you did make the amps of that general character more usable, but it didn't feel like you took away, like I'm not going to name any names, but there are certain guitar manufacturers who make perfect Strat style guitars, right? But it's like, I always say, my typical refrain is, they engineered out all the funk. Like, they are
Yeah.
perfect.
Well, yeah.
But it's like, but like, it's the bumps that made it attractive, like, they're all gone. It's just completely
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
didn't do that with
You can
the Sound City.
definitely design a product to death. And Rob, that is really sweet and kind, and thank you, and feelings mutual. We really understood your need to move, and the reasons that you moved to where you moved to, and all that. Totally understood that. But yeah, it was it's kind of heartbreaking seeing you go just when you were starting to really sort of get your gears lined up with all of ours.
You know what I remember about Rob was, you know, Rob and I, like, we did one NAMM show together. That was like the only time we really hung out in a room together, for the most part. And like, I met him, he's doing work with you guys, and then it seemed like he turned around and boom, there's Tessie Switch. Like, oh damn, you made a company.
Yeah,
Like, that was super cool. And we hadn't talked about that happening. It was just like, you turn around and boom, you're doing this thing. And I love it when people do that. So now, I'm going to try and steer you in a direction.
okay.
Because we talked about doing questions, but we're not done with the amp. So we should probably listen to it. Why don't we, I think we're set up to compare and contrast Dave's now, we're not going to call that a modded head. What do you want to call it? come up with a name for what you did.
Oh, I think we're
A rollback?
I think we're just completing the mission
Okay.
of converting a PA 100 head into a genuinely playable DR 103.
A 103-esque.
Yeah, no, it's a 103 now.
Okay, it's a 103. All right. And then we have a 504.
Right, which is, these both have all
So they're
the
different.
same all the same topology up to, they have 2 less tubes and smaller transformers, and so they compress and give up the goods a little more easily than a 100. But other than that, they tonally work the same way.
We should listen to how it sounds now.
All right, so are we starting with the 50?
It looks like I'm plugged into it, so sure.
All right, so we're going to start with the 50, and we've got a specific, we don't have them set up the same way. We have the 50 set up the way I want it to sound. And then we have the now DR103 set up the way I want it to sound. And the sonic balance is very similar. Not exact, because they have different transformers and more power. One of them has more power, but they're in the same ballpark because I dial them in to be in the same ballpark. But that
We didn't have any time, though.
that necessarily means that the controls aren't going to be set identically. Okay. And
So that's DR504. And then do I need to do the switch down here?
yes.
Switchy switch?
Okay.
What do you hear? What do you hear?
Let's go back one more time and do this one.
So that's 504.
That's the 504.
Okay, now, are we going back?
Okay, let's go. Because why not? Yeah, the 100 does have a more substantial low end, of course. It's got,
It feels cleaner under my fingers too.
right. The two overriding things that are going on there are 50% more iron in the output transformer,
Yeah.
plus the extra two tubes, and the amount of signal that the first tube stage sees that makes it overdrive is less because the input resistors are higher value than they are in here because I don't have the 4 inputs jacked.
Aha!
So if I had the 4
Right.
inputs jacked, I would back off the gains of the bright and normal channels a little bit, and so you would hear that. But there's still the chewiness that you hear in the 50, you wouldn't hear in the 100.
Sure.
And
But that's why we have 50s and why we have 100s.
and Scott, you said a bit of chonk, and I understood exactly what you said, what you meant. So I backed off. I backed off the brilliant volume on the 100 right after you posted that, and it brought some of that chonk down a little bit, which I sort of interpreted to be sort of a kind of a forward upper mid that really brings out that sort of characteristic honk of the PAS style humbuckers. And who was it that commented? It sounded like the Jimmy Page's Royal Albert Hall tone.
Oh, yeah, Braxton.
And you know, if anybody's got a chonk in their guitar tone, it's Page, because
Yeah.
of course, because he uses both pickups, but still, that's really in fact, you know what would be fun is instead of trying to make just this an overdrive machine, is to back off the gains a little bit and just sort of moderate how much it's really being overdriven and bring out more of the guitar wood, and then play it with both pickups. And I think the Jimmy Page setting is that he uses both pickups, but he has the bridge, the neck pickup turned down like 1 notch or something like that. You know about that?
Hell no, but I don't care.
All right, well, let's
I'm
try
drinking
it.
Laphroaig, guys.
Now, is that the neck pickup turned down 1 notch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So,
There's no way I'm going to sound like Jimmy Page.
but that was pretty interesting. So let's now switch down there.
Oh, the other.
The other end.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn this down too. And that's the bright one. And that's a little bit up. This down to there. Okay. You were saying?
I was just saying that's interesting. Like when I'm playing the single notes, I thought, oh, we're kind of clean, but like when you kind of lean into the chords, like it gets nice and juicy again.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's the chonk,
yeah,
right, Scott? Yeah.
yeah, that's
fun.
the chunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I backed the gain off on the 100, and
Braxton says he loves the fuzziness, but you would love the fuzziness because aren't you saying like you're into more of the doom thing? Which would totally make sense. Tunes like a Gibson. No, that's me drinking Laphroaig. That's all me, brother. Yeah, so do we need to play this more or should we go into other questions? I can bang on this all night long because it's fun. What do you think, guys? Do you have any other? Should we set these things up any other way?
Let me play around with the setup of the 50 for a minute.
Yeah.
And then I'll set up the 100 the same.
Do you want to
way.
play? Or are you saying me
Yeah.
play?
Yeah, I want to fiddle around with your guitar because I like your guitar.
It's a cool guitar. I want to fiddle around with my guitar someday. I never practice anymore.
I'm way out of practice.
Me too.
I'm like sucking big
I
time
used to
right
play
now.
guitar.
that's my favorite thing to do, is to listen to the way one amp behaves and try to get another amp to make it behave like that.
Okay, real fast, I want to see, turn on the thing, let's see.
Okay, now these amps are a couple of years apart, and the pots that are in Dave's amp are, their tapers are different. So you can't set them anywhere near the same to get the same setting. So now that I got a chance to play around with both of them and sort of really dial in,
Yeah.
I think I've got them sounding really, really close. You can still hear the chewiness of the 50 over the 100.
You can't get rid of that. That's just what that amp does.
Right.
Yeah.
But it did bring out the sort of right amount of sort of harmonic distortion and the fatness. A little more MIDI, than the 50. That's true. Yeah.
Rob on the marketing
Yeah.
push. That's bold, brother. I dig it. Okay, so that was fun. Should we move into the question answering portion of the
Yeah.
evening?
Yeah. I got to say though, I think really, if you're going to be a Hiwatt player and you're trying to find really the ultimate expression of the Hiwatt vibe, just get a 50 and a 100 and run them both together.
Well, that's funny because the people say just get the this and be done with it, and what you're saying is just get them both.
Just get them both. Yeah.
Because you can't. Oh shit, Brendan, you had to do it.
It had to be done. It had to be done, right?
The touring circuit.
Had to be done.
Ba-dum-bum-ba-dum-bum. Okay, so I'm gonna open up my phone.
So
hey, look, Scott, check this out. We're gonna do this in real time, brother.
So, like I said earlier, we just grabbed a sort of a representative sample of some previous questions that we never got around to, and
Because we talk too much.
yeah, exactly. Thanks, John. And yeah, you know, you guys, you distinctly fall into, I like the chewy vibe, I like the kick in the balls vibe. There's a real distinct crew for each of those.
See, I tend to fall a little bit more on the big iron, open, wide side. If I have to choose one, and that's kind of with almost every amplifier. Like certainly with Hiwatts and Marshalls, I tend to feel that way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I know like your home base is the DR504. So like you're...
Well, yeah, but then again, when I hear that, I just think, all it needs. That's why I think the D60 is the right amp for me, because it has that little extra thing that a typical 51 amp doesn't have. which is that extra little wallop on the
But
bottom.
I mean, you guys are hearing it, and Steve is saying it, and I guess it's just true. Like you really do just want to mix them together because
Why
that's
not?
Nirvana. Yeah, because why not? Because why not? What, we have 3 phones going on now?
Well, you have a list,
I have a list.
and then Erica.
Oh,
gave-
there's other questions. Cool.
But I think
you tell me what you want to do first.
I think that we covered these.
Was this from another episode?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I
So
think
I
we're
think
good
we
here.
covered these on the list that you have.
Okay. So what's kind of interesting about some of these is that they're not necessarily questions, they were comments, but I think you wanted to elaborate on them. So like the first one from a fellow named Nigel, and he says, I like mismatched tubes by about 10 milliamps. I like asymmetrical clipping. What do you have to say about that? Because I got nothing.
I get you on the asymmetrical clipping. There is a sonic characteristic to that, and I agree with you for the most part. However, 10 milliamps isn't enough to give you asymmetrical clipping. You're going to need, and the reason I say that is because if you put a pair of power tubes in a 50 watt amp and run them up to clipping, and one of them idles at 10 milliamps more than the other one, they're still going to clip symmetrically. And part of that is, that's due to a number of reasons. First of all, most amps have a feedback loop, and the feedback loop tends to correct a little bit for the nonlinearities. So that is some of it. And the next thing is it depends on how much headroom the phase inverter stage has. If it has a lot, it's going to drive both tubes pretty much equally to the point where you have to understand the idle is only the idle. It's only the bias setting of the power tubes when they're not producing power. When they're producing power, things change, and they don't change linearly, they change logarithmically. So what happens is when you push everything up to the maximum and you're at the point where you're at clipping, you're maxing out the power supply. So it doesn't really matter that the tubes idle 10 milliamps apart. What happens is how they're behaving when they're maxed out. And some amps tend to be self-correcting in that regard when you crank them up full. So in order for you to get enough difference between the tubes to have the power tubes causing asymmetrical clipping, you've got to be in the 30 to 50 milliamp range, my friend. Pretty sure.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. I mean, I'm saying you need like a 50% difference. And a perfect example of this is
I like Laphroaig.
thank you for letting me know that, because I never would have known that. In fact, I like it too.
Do you?
In fact,
I thought you were just humoring me.
No,
You want some
no.
more?
Yes, I do.
I'm gonna fuck you up.
Oh God, I'm always embarrassed when I forget names, but I always forget names. Steve Vai's touring guitar.
Thomas. Oh, touring guitar. Dave Weiner.
Dave Weiner.
Yeah, he's awesome.
A few years ago, they were out touring. This was probably 10 years ago. They were out touring, and Dave was using an ultra lead, and one of the power tubes went bad. And he called me up. He says, "One of my KT88s went dead. Is it okay to run the amp with just 3?" And I said, "Try it and see." He says, "Well, that's what I'm calling. I have been running it that way, and I really like it that way.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So is it okay to do that?" And I go, "Yeah. You can do one of two things. You can either take the bad one out and take its pair out, and the two remaining ones will be balanced, or you can just leave one in there and it'll be non-symmetrical. That you won't burn out anything, you won't hurt anything. You'll just get asymmetrical clipping." He goes, "Yeah, I'm hearing that. I kind of like that." And of course, What is asymmetrical clipping? We've been through this and been through this. It gives the amp this more pinched, cockwa nasal kind of thing.
Which isn't a broken amp. It's just a sonic quality.
Yeah,
and you either dig it or you don't.
It's
right?
a characteristic of Marshall's jacked all the way out. So he really liked that. So yeah, but you have to have a significant difference in there in order to really perceive that as a distinctive, tonally different thing than everything running symmetrically.
Hey, before I ask you the next question, are you done with that one?
Yeah, let me just say one more thing.
Okay.
I really do like the sound that that pinched harmonic makes when you're playing a solo. It's got this sort of that cockwa, that speaking sort of cutting thing. I do like that. The only problem is I don't want an amp that does that all the time, because then it doesn't do any of the other
The
things.
Michael
that you want it to
Schenker,
do.
like Hank Sherman, Merciful Fate kind of lead sound.
Yeah, it's great lead sound, but if you're trying to play a bunch of different things and you have the amp do a bunch of different things, it does that one thing great and everything else crappy.
Yeah.
So I tend to lean towards more symmetrical amps because I use them in the low to mid gain range most of the time.
Me
and
too.
I like, especially with my Esquire, I like that big piano ring.
I'll set it up for that kind of pinch thing if I'm tracking stuff and I need that thing specifically, but I don't want that stepping on stage.
Yeah, but so many of the times you can get that with a pedal that is...
Oh, totally.
Right.
Well, a tube screamer will
Yeah.
get you there in a big hurry.
That's right.
Hey, because Carlos is on the show, I want to throw this one up here. Do you see that, Steve?
Say what?
The question that popped up. Can you see that? I can read it if...
About my Synergy rig, I'm wondering how close it is to the D.
So imagine it's
I should follow the vibe.
the Synergy Deliverance module versus the Deliverance Series 2.
Well,
120.
the Deliverance amp, of course, has its dedicated power amp section in it,
That's the biggest
and
difference.
that's the biggest deal. The basic topology of the preamp stage is, for the most part, encapsulated in the module. Of course, there's design limitations in the module. It doesn't have quite as much plate voltage as you would see in the amp. But on the other hand, that means that you might get a more homogenized sort of mid-range saturation out of the module than the head, unless you're pushing the head a little harder. So it's kind of 6 one, half dozen the other. I don't want to say you should have both.
Depends on what your budget is. Depends on what you're doing. Like Dean DeLeo's running the modules. He's touring around.
He's running the module into the LX2 power amp,
And I would do that if I were doing dates. If I was flying right now, I would definitely do a Synergy rig. But I'll tell you that my next amplifier that I will be buying is a D60.
Okay, we need Carlos is clarifying.
Oh, did
So
he?
pull up his clarification.
Awesome.
The question is, if a Synergy D2 is plugged into the PS100 in self-attenuation mode, then into my 292, you're going to get more power amp saturation that way, which you would also get if you were running the D120 into a power station and saturating the whole kit and caboodle that way. So the answer is, you're still you can get very close. You can get close to it. Depends. You can get close enough to where it becomes up to you how much different or better it sounds to you. You can accomplish some things with the module into the PS100. And by the way, I wouldn't use the PS100 in self-attenuation mode if that's the only reason I had a PS100. I'd use the PS2 for that because it's easier to do it with it.
Why is it easier?
Well, I mean, if that's all you're doing with it, it takes less power for it to self-saturate.
Oh, but it's not like technically easier to set it up.
No.
It's like internally technically.
It's just, if
Yeah.
you're talking about if you don't have a PS100 yet, and this is the way you plan on
That's what
using
you
it,
want to use the power station for, you're saying?
yeah.
Like, you were sure.
yeah, then I would just say,
Sure.
I would say the PS2 would probably be a better choice for that.
Which is kind of funny because like my choice is the PS100, just because I'm like, just get the damn Cadillac. But I know kind of for you, you have a heart a little bit more for the PS2.
Well, it's not about that. It's what I normally use attenuation for. The PS2 covers all my needs.
I always fall back on the bigger power section that just speaks a little bit more to me, you know. And so
Now, if I'm playing live, I will prefer the PS100.
right.
But if I'm doing self-attenuation mode and then using another power amplifier to reamp the entire thing, module into PS100 reamped and then into a stereo power amp, something like that, I would just use the PS2.
So man, years ago, Steve used to
We're like
come,
slicing and dicing it really thin here, guys.
yeah, chopping it up. Years ago, Steve used to come to my gigs that I used to do with this instrumental band, and I was running my 68 Super Reverb that you guys have heard on the show. And I was running all sorts of pedals into it, and like the problem that I was having in that band, because you know we weren't playing like super huge legitimate shows where like the sound was great in rooms. Like I really needed a giant like amp with a ton of clean headroom, and my Super Reverb just wasn't quite cutting it. And I remember you'd come to those gigs, and at the time the PS1 was out, and you'd say, just use that. I'm like, I can't quite get it, you know. And so the PS100 to me was the answer that I was looking for. So I'm super happy to have that thing in my arsenal. And what was I thinking? I've been drinking too much Laphroaig. Of course, Scott. Of course, I followed you, man. Anybody who let all of us malcontents, let's follow each other.
And get a power load, and you can reamp with dangerous amounts of power. And that's all about the danger, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's bang through some of the other backload list of questions. That
Totally. What did I see on there? I wanted to comment on it. Who's getting the private stock PRS? Brendan? Dude, how much do No, I'm not going to ask you that. That's rude. I want to know how much they cost these days and like what kind of wood is on that thing. But while you're gauging whether or not you want to share that with all of us, I'm going to ask Steve another question. So this is from Vox Pathfinder, and he says, or she says, I tested the filter capacitors on my Carvin MTS 3200, made in 96, 97, that tested better than brand new F&T caps on my MK-168 tester. I don't know what that is. I had them out, so I swapped in the F&T for the video I was filming, but I saved the OEM capacitors and will reuse them.
Right.
What does that mean to you?
Well, okay, the tester he's talking about is a little inexpensive. It's a $40 LCR meter. Similar. It's
that's
like
the MK-168?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an LCR meter, which is we use a LCR meter most of the time for testing capacitors, and they are more accurate. And I'm not gonna diss on a $50 LCR meter, because a lot of these new things that are more software based and inexpensive are actually really good. So I don't know that particular unit, but testing better is subjective anyway. Even it's not what the meter says. It's really what you understand about what you're testing and what the results are telling you.
Yeah.
And your Vox amp isn't really old enough for there to be a significant difference. I don't know if you're talking about when you say it tests better, that's subjective, or without a qualification such as better how, closer intolerance, or what.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the LCR meter will tell you the capacitance, unless you set it to check
If you get
the series resistance. So if you're just only talking about capacitance, you could be saying that the capacitors in your Vox amps, the stock ones tested at, they say 40 mics, and it tested at 40 mics, where the F&Ts say 40 mics, and you tested them at 50 or 30. Either one of those are within tolerance, so it doesn't really matter that much. You'd be very, very hard-pressed to hear the difference in low-frequency response between that amplifier loaded with one type of cap and the amplifier loaded with the other type.
Okay.
So you're still in that subjective range where where you're still in the ballpark, and the tolerance, the white tolerance is that way because in that application it doesn't make a significant difference.
Okay. Hey, Brendan, that's awesome, man. Chime in with what finish you got. I totally want to know. I actually have a PRS still, and I've had it forever. It's one of the hollow body spruces, and man, that is a killing guitar. Oh, and John just followed me, so I'm going to follow you back. You ready for another question,
Yeah.
Steve?
Hit me.
Aye. This is from John Lucas, and he's gonna lead off with buttering you up. Steve, I love everything you do, but not replacing electrolytics after 20 plus years old is completely silly.
Stop right there. In your estimation, it might be silly,
I'm winding you up.
but again, all I can reiterate to you is this. If you have the correct test equipment and understand what you're doing, and you do the test, and the test says that they're a valid, legitimate test, says they're good, they're good.
That's your whole thesis.
Yeah.
It's just test it rather than just assume.
It's not you put a capacitor on a $1,500 piece of test equipment that you understand how to use, and you understand the parameters that you're testing, and it passes those parameters, it's good. It isn't just good on the meter, but mysteriously bad in an amplifier for hypothetical reasons that, because two parallel universes are 1 millimeter closer together than a couple of other parallel universes that are a couple of meters farther apart, and that's going to color your judgment about the sound. That's just looking for validation for an unsupported idea, which is that if you can test the components, they're good. And if they test bad, they're bad. And if you test the components and they test good, you can't therefore assume that they're bad because you don't understand the test, or it's because they're old. They shouldn't test good, so there must be something bad in them, even though the test that I did says they're good.
That
I
makes
mean,
sense.
at what point do you not, if that's your attitude, throw away your test gear. It's not doing you any good anyway because you're denying the validity of equipment that you're paying money to use.
Brendan, is that your guitar? That's gorgeous.
And again, 20 years is nothing.
20 years is nothing. That's right, because in the last episode we talked about.
And finally, if they test good, they're good.
Okay, so that was your response to John.
Okay?
Okay. David Cox, our buddy, says, what I always wonder about caps is that when I see an amp on Craigslist that looks almost mint unused at all, and the seller says something like, I got this amp new back in 2005, but it hasn't been used at all in the last 15 years, and has been stored in my closet for the whole time, would you expect that for the caps to have dried?
Actually, I responded to that
Okay.
in the comments, and it turned out that he had it tested, and it turned out that the capacitors were fine. And stop using terms like dried out.
Okay. Right on, Carlos. Take care, man. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hanging.
If you're using terms like dried out, you don't really understand how the capacitor works, and what the separation of electrolytes mean. They're not evaporating and disappearing.
Are they hardening?
They're undergoing a chemical change as a result of inactivity.
Okay.
And you reverse the chemical change of them being inactive
And that's
by
what he's
activating
saying.
them.
He's saying, and would they be able to be restored if
That's
done
what
correct?
reforming does.
Got it.
It's
And we've done a video on that with the concert.
that's right.
And you walked us through how to do that, basically. And should...
I just really, what I really get from these repetitive questions on this issue, what I get is the dogma has been pounded into your head for so long, so relentlessly, by people who don't really do the tests or read the material and make the correlation, or are just doing it because they're lazy or want to make a buck. You've heard it so many times that one person's contrarian voice isn't enough to sway you off of, why have been I hearing this for so long? Well, you hear a lot of, unsubstantiated things for long periods of time that aren't based in fact, but they're repeated so many times that you finally become to believe them.
Yeah, people told me I was cool for a while, man.
Well, that's what
I
you
found
get
out
for
that wasn't
that's
true.
what you get for believing what people tell
I
you.
know, man. I learned my lesson.
What else we got?
As kind of an addendum to that question.
Okay.
So if he's going to try out an amp like that, it's been sitting there. is
Well,
it
I think what
okay
I
to turn
responded
it
to
on?
him was he's talking about an amp that he was buying on eBay or Craigslist or something.
You're saying it's way under the vintage that you should ever be worried
Not
about.
only that, but okay, tell me, I want everybody who hasn't considered this idea to respond on the live chat with a wave. All right? The guy who's selling the amp on Craigslist said, I checked it out, it works fine. That means he said, even though that it had sat in storage for 15 years or something, before he decided to sell it on a Craigslist, he turned it on and played it to make sure that it was good and worked before he sold it to you, and he told you that. That means that if it sat in storage for 15 years, and then he turned it on and played through it, the idea of reforming the capacitor is moot because he already powered it up. So he didn't do that procedure. And you got it, you bought it, you played through it, it works fine. You were being conscientious, so you took it to the repair shop, and the tech told you it's working fine, everything is good. So the entire conversation is moot because the seller already turned it on, not the safe way to check it before selling it to you. So the entire question is blown up.
Okay. That was awesome. Braxton, I'm replying to you. Could you guys do a demonstration of a Sound City Master 100 used as a pedal platform sometime? Brother, I say we do that on the next show.
Okay, I'm totally into that. Now, what I want you to do, Braxton,
Yeah, actually throw it all in the chat. I know what you're going to say.
I want you to tell me how you set up an amp.
Oh, I was going to say throw pedal choices in here.
I want pedal
'Cause,
choices.
yeah, what would you guys like to hear
We
through-
want specifics, but I also want to know what settings, do you have the amp? If you have the amp, what settings do you set it at where you consider it a pedal platform? Do you actually set it perfectly pristine clean, and where are the knob settings? Or if it's not the SC100, what other amp do you use that way, and where do you set it? Because all of this requires context to give you a meaningful answer. Without that, we're just giving you
Yeah, well, no, we really
Our
want to do the
perspective.
hell out of this. This would be awesome because Braxton is definitely into the fuzz thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, hit us up with pedals that you would like to hear through a clean platform amplifier. OCD, I have OCD, but BMO, like the OCD, the whole thing about the OCD is like there's so many different versions. Like, what's your favorite version? I think I have like my favorite. Actually, I don't think I've tried all of the iterations. I think I've tried them all up to the 4, and I think the 3 is my favorite one. I've got a couple different ones. Anyway, a Timmy, okay. A Phase 90 fuzz. Scott. Clean, but enough that it's almost breaking up. Okay, so kind of on the edge. Very warm, mid-forward, cleanish tone. Okay. Are Strymons any good? Do you mean Strymon distortion pedal stuff or like time domain stuff? I only really have experience with the time domain stuff, and I think those pedals are ridiculously great. My go-to pedal actually the only pedal that I really use now is the Strymon Dig. It's the digital delay thing, the pink pedal, and I have the version 1. I think they're on version 2. But I also have on my Sideman pedal board, I have the Big Sky, the big reverb pedal, and I think they're great. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Keep them coming. Stuff that you want to hear, we'll try and gather as many of these as we can. Kelly, are you saying Strymon stuff expensive if you need presets? That's funny because like I hardly use any. I just like set those pedals for like 1 or 2 sounds, but they sound so good they're kind of worth it. And I bought them years ago, so it doesn't matter.
Right, what else we got?
We got this is from Jim Coleman. Question: I would love to learn how to tinker and make a beginner amp. What would your recommendations be to a noob? How do you get started, man? You start by repairing shit, or you get a kit, or what do?
Kit.
Who makes a good kit?
Just buy a kit.
Doesn't matter. Get in there and get lost and get.
Yeah.
And then
Go
get
down the
yourself out.
trail, get caught up in the bramble bushes and get scratched, and get a shock. Try not to get too serious of a shock that you can recover from it. But as a player, did you read a book to learn how to play, or did you just like get a guitar and go show up at rehearsal and have everybody spit in your face until you finally went to a rehearsal where somebody said, "Hey, you sound pretty good."
Or you're going, why do I suck so bad? I still do that.
I don't know who makes a good kit, but I know that there are kits out there. I think the Seriatone kits are pretty, all you have to do is just search the internet and see what people think are the good kits. And a good kit is not necessarily promising to be some holy grail sounding amp. A good kit is a product that has all the parts, good documentation,
Ding, ding, ding.
and a good advanced instruction about what basic tools you need to start out with and all of that stuff. It's those things are the things that you need to really sort of get started, is knowing where you need to even start from. You can't buy a kit and start building a kit if you don't have tools and solder and some really basic test equipment. Now I've had people come to me and go, "Oh yeah, hey, I built an amp myself."
I did once.
And I'm like going, "Great." And then establish a rapport with that person, and they start sending me emails like, "Yeah, my amp just started working. What do you think it is?" Wait, aren't you the guy that said you built an amp?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I don't really know how it works. Well, you didn't build an amp. You soldered a bunch of parts together in a box. Now that's different.
Right.
Buying a kit.
But that's the bridge that you have to bridge that gap, because everybody is that way at first. If you buy a kit, you're just soldering shit where it's painting by numbers.
My dad used to get so mad at me because I would buy a kit or a model when I started making models.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's where you can
He
start.
would bust my ass because I had no patience. I wanted to finish the thing. He would before you glue the pieces together, paint them.
Oh,
Like-
models?
Yeah.
Oh, what kind of models did you
Oh,
used to do?
any
Like
kind
planes?
of
Oh my
planes.
God, I
cars.
used to do models.
Well, I had all the monster
World War
models.
II planes and shit
I had
like that.
Frankenstein and the Dracula. I had all the
Oh, I
monster
never
models.
did like figures.
But I finally learned that I had to take
Oh.
Take all the parts out and spread them all out, and then paint them individually, and then glue them together.
But Scott is saying this, and you know what, brother? That's number one. Don't buy a shitty, cheap soldering iron.
No.
Dude, that's golden advice.
Buy the best equipment that you can afford in advance.
Oh my God.
I built my first Dynakit stereo power amp with one of those Weller guns
Oh, serious?
that were,
How many watts is that?
oh, I don't know, it was I still have it.
Was it too hot, or was it too spicy, or not spicy enough?
Well, it had a bunch of different tips,
Okay.
right? But it was this big, bulky Bakelite thing with a big trigger on it. It was a gun, and it had a small tip for small soldering work, and then it had a heavier tip for heavier soldering work, and then it had this flat tip for melting bags shut, plastic bags, so you could seal plastic bags. It was like one of these like does everything kind of thing.
Okay.
And I built a couple of kits for that, and then I discovered a soldering pencil and I was like, are these as good as my Weller gun? Because my Weller gun kicks ass. And I soon learned that using a soldering iron or a soldering pencil are better. And then, of course, for heavier soldering applications or smaller soldering applications, you need to have 2 or 3. And of course, at the company, we have soldering stations that have plug-in tips and temperature controls and all kinds of things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you start out with something, Heiko. Heiko makes a really good soldering station.
But you know what happens
that's
if you-
reasonable and
If you buy a shitty soldering iron, then you just get to learn the lesson of, oh, I need to buy a better soldering iron. So that can be a
yeah.
part
When you
of the
buy a
journey.
cheap one and it breaks in 3 months, then you go, oh yeah, maybe I should pay twice as much and get one that breaks in 6 months or 1 year or 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. So, did we answer that question?
Yeah.
I'm Laphroaig down. Okay. So that was Jim Coleman's question. So here's a quick one from Quentin, actually. He asked on the last episode, doesn't one of the guys in Volbeat use fry amps?
Yeah, Rob Caggiano.
Oh,
He's got
yeah.
I
I forgot he was in that band.
He's got 8 412 cabs, Deliverance cabs. 4 of them have Celestion vintage 30s in them, and 4 of them have P50s in them. And then he's got 6 SIG-X amps. And on the SIGs, he uses the red channel for his rhythm sound and the green channel for his lead sound. And I don't know if that's just because Rob is contrary or what, but because he's got an overdrive pedal that he uses on a wah.
Okay.
So I guess it would make sense that he uses the green channel for solos because he always also uses a distortion pedal for his solos.
Okay.
So it would make sense that he would use the red channel, the lead channel,
So he's using
as the rhythm channel and turns the pedal off because it has more gain.
He's kind of
or
using
mid-gain.
the lead pedal as like just kick it over the top.
He's a
It's not
shredder
his
guy,
main-
he's a shredder guy anyway.
Okay.
And he started out using the CLX head,
Uh-huh.
and then he used the Ultra Lead for a while, but he just fell head over heels in love with the SIG-X. And this was, 10 years ago, he started working with Volbeat 8, something like that. And he's been using the SIG-X's ever since.
And our buddy Joe Barisi works with them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Stephen Carpenter from Deftones. This is from Lucas Curry. Was using the Sound City 412s and 212 cabs, and now Hiwatt cabs. Does that
Yeah.
make sense with you?
Yeah.
And what fanes is he using?
Those are the F70s Gs.
F70 Gs.
Those are the custom fanes that we had made.
I love that speaker.
It's a great speaker.
love that
It's a great
fucking
speaker.
speaker.
You know what? It's an underappreciated speaker because it's not a Celestion, and a lot of people.
It's just balance. It's just.
Yeah, you have to grow into that. You have to be able to.
But then the amp can just do what it's going to do, and,
Yeah, you have
and the
to
speaker
get,
isn't
You
dictating.
have to get
the thing.
unhooked from the Canon. I mean, we say this all the time. There's the dogma. You got to do things this way. Everybody's got to sound the same. Everybody's got to use the same rig as a Marshall with a Celestion and blah blah blah. And there are guys. Pete Thorne will tell you, I'm a greenback guy. Sometimes I like green, the 30s, the H30s. I'm a Marshall guy. I like this. I like this. I like this, and absolutely for those sounds. But not everybody is like that. Not everybody plays like that. And there are other choices out there. You know,
I like it.
Warehouse makes a good range of speakers that are nice, and on and on and on. My thing with Fane is interesting because just like the Hiwatts, I glommed onto Fane because they were not Celestians. I was just,
It was total malcontent
yeah,
behavior.
exactly. And then,
Malcontent mindset.
but the Fanes disappointed me time and time again over little subtle things until they finally were repurchased by the original family that owned them in the 70s, which is who is making them now. And they finally listened to somebody's outside opinion and said, could you just do it like this? And they went, okay. And they did it like this. And then we finally had a speaker that we've been trying to get them and Celestian to build for decades. They finally did it. And that's the speakers that we're using right now. And I love them. I use the IR. I use the speakers.
Yeah.
I just never get tired of them. I never think, am I using this speaker just because we were involved with them and I have some skin in the game and I want to sell them? No, that's not it. I play them because I love them, and I pitch them to the artists that we work with because our artists, any artist, is always evolving. Kind always trying to extend their craft.
And I think it's really
refine
important that we
everything.
say here that I know you well enough to kind of speak for the
Oh,
both
you
of
think
us.
you know me?
I think I do. I think I do well enough to say this.
Because I'm not your bitch. You know?
Well, just wait. You drink enough of that Laphroaig. But
You don't know me.
the night is young, and there's plenty left in that bottle. All right, I'll shut up. That was horrible.
Yeah.
Did I actually say that?
This is how we know.
I'm going to jail.
This is how we know we're going off the fucking rails.
Yeah. That nothing that we talk about here, like you love Celestians. I love Celestians. I love all those speakers. I love all the amps, right? We love all the amps. Like they're all great for what they do.
I love all the amps. I love all the speakers. I love all the tubes.
Oh, absolutely. Like just
I
all
love,
this shit.
I love all the cockroaches and the broken down old amps that I buy. Although I do throw them away because they're disgusting. But
yeah. Or do
just
you
the
remember-
idea that they were in there.
Do you remember when we had David Torn on, and he was talking about when he got his first VHT amp and
okay,
had like
let's not go there.
the bird's nest?
Yeah. Let's.
So anyway, let's
Because
answer.
then I'll have to start talking about the amps that people sent us with their dirty laundry as packing material.
But we should do that on some show.
Okay.
But right now, let's answer Wes's question. As an owner of an amp company, how do you choose what kinds of circuits to design? Do you design what you want to play, or you design with the market in mind, like what you think people will want?
That's a great question.
It is.
So, first of all,
And I'm going to use the restroom while you answer this.
which circuits do you use? Well, there's a context. There's always an underlying context to a question like that. Do you use a Marshall phase inverter or a Fender phase inverter? If that's the type of question that doesn't really factor in. What factors in is what do we know that works in a particular context based on our own experience about in the past what has worked in our experience within the context of the gear that we make. And there is a lot of different things that we've done differently for different reasons. Now, when I first got started, I did things like try each kind of circuit topology in a different product to see if that would be the ideal topology for that particular product, that particular amplifier, the behavior of it. But pretty early on, I kind of glommed onto a couple of topologies that I generally like the way they operate because of the characteristic sound and feel that they bring to the amplifier that we're building. So we're kind of well known for using the concertina phase inverter. And but there are times when a long tail pair phase inverter works better. On the ether amp, I purposely focused on 1940s technology because the whole mindset of the ether was, what kind of amp would I have designed if it was 1945? That was the whole concept of the ether amp, was what would I have done if it was 1945 to
What were you
1950?
drinking? What were you smoking? What were you watching? Where did that idea come from? Like, why was that? Why was that idea floating around in your head?
It was just a thought experiment. What would I be doing if I was Leo Fender at 30 years old? Yeah, I don't think Leo Fender was hitting the.
No, he was hitting the
blue.
pocket protector with like.
Yeah, total pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like going to the local metal shop and, hey, you know that scrap iron that you sold me for the truss rods?
The truss.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're all out of that. And they're like, yeah, well, that was all B-stock scrap metal that we were selling you before. Well, what B-stock scrap metal do you have? Oh, we've got the similar kind of stuff. It's a slightly different diameter, but it'll still do the same thing. And he goes and he buys that, and he goes, oh yeah, so this particular Strat has this kind of a truss
Right,
rod in it.
exactly.
And then,
Well, now we're gonna do rosewood fretboards because
that's what's available.
rosewood was on sale.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
Maple's too expensive.
For me, it's not like that. For me, it's about. I spent a lot of time examining all the different topologies and finding out what their strengths and weaknesses were, and then I settled on a group of things that I like for a particular application. And then, but when I did the ether, like I said, for example, I just went off the rails because it was a whole thought experiment about doing something that I normally wouldn't have done for any other reason, any other way. Just I put myself in a headspace and went there. I'm going to do this. I'm going to throw myself back in time. I think that started from Sound City.
Can we?
My idea about Sound City was I'm going to send myself back in time to the point where David Reese started making amps. With the ether, I went, I'm going to roll back the clock to the 40s when Fender started messing around with amplifiers, and what would the contrarian down the street with a little shop do different than what they were doing at that time?
Could we do a video where it's about the ether, where we get into it,
Mhm.
and it would be a documentary on the ether? I would love to do that.
All right, we'll do that.
That makes me happy.
All right, so
Because the ether's my favorite small amp.
let me answer a quick one that doesn't require a big
Are we done
leap.
with Wes's question? I'm sorry, I was out of the room when you were talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, but no, it's not. I'm not trying to kowtow to the market. I'm making something based on what I'm usually trying to solve a problem that I've envisioned. Okay, here's a problem. It needs a solution. If I come up with a good solution, then I'm not trying to I'm not trying to market something. I'm trying to come up with a solution that I think that players out there will want, and that will be the market. Just a quick one, Mark Hamstra. Yes, Pete Thorne did contact me. A couple of years ago, I introduced him to the Fanes, and he was like, oh, yeah. But now he's like interested, maybe because of your conversation with him. But now he seems to have upped his level of interest in the Fanes, and did contact me about that. And that's what I find with the Fane speakers is we've been pushing them for 4 or 5 years now, but people are now just starting to go, I'd like to check those out.
Well,
And
Pete
that's-
was probably just exhausting his, just going down the Celestian path for, you know what I mean? You get super into something, and you do it, and you take it to its logical conclusion, and then eventually you're like, okay, I'm curious about this stuff. What's next? You know?
All right, let's try to bang out a few more quick ones and then get the hell out of
See
here.
you, John. Thanks for showing up, man. Thanks for hanging. I think we only have a couple more.
Well, let's see. There was
Well, there's Willie's question here. If we're looking at new ones, I have two older VHT fat bottom 412 cabs with P50Es and a Hiwatt fat bottom 412 with P50. Newer speakers are brighter sounding. How do the F70s compare?
two older fat bottoms with P50s and a Hiwatt fat bottom with P50. The newer speakers are brighter. The newer speakers could be brighter just because they're newer, and will probably mellow out.
Okay.
It depends on how old the older ones are. It could be a cabinet construction issue. Your older cabinet will have, the wood in it will have dried out, where the newer cabinet, there was probably a higher moisture content in the wood.
But if it's a higher moisture content, wouldn't that be kind of dulling it out a little bit?
Actually, no.
Huh.
No, a greener wood will tend to be spikier,
Are you kidding me?
and
I swear that's the opposite in guitars.
no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think
The
in
more
all
moisture
instruments,
content would like dampen. Well, maybe not the high end.
well, I just think that for example, when Eriko came here from Japan, she has this this snare drum, a maple snare drum, that once she got to California and it dry and with the lower humidity, that drum got much louder and a bigger mid-range spank,
Well, that makes sense.
and that would be the same with cabinets.
Right. When
I
it
have
gets
my
drier,
mom,
it does.
yeah, I have my mom's piano that she got when she was 5, and we have it in our living room. And every time she comes down here and plays it, she goes, "It just sounds so much better than I remember." And you know,
It was dried out down
It came here from Seattle.
I
where
used to live in Seattle, where
Yeah.
it's waterlogged.
It spent its time in eastern Washington, up in the higher elevations where the humidity was generally higher. And then it went to Seattle for a long time, and then it came down here. And when it came down here, she was like, "I don't remember it being this loud," and it's just very resonant, and it dried out. And I
Yeah.
think that with regard to the brightness, I think it's not that the higher moisture content dulls the brightness. I think that it just makes it less resonant overall. So when it dries out,
But that's
the
dull, right?
the mid-range comes up and makes it a little louder.
Okay, well, actually,
more-
you're bringing up an interesting point, which is almost this, I don't want to call it a mirage, but mid-range is an interesting beast.
Okay, so go to Gorman's follow-up question on that.
Well, wait a minute. How do the F70s compare?
The F70s, first of all, they have a higher sensitivity, so they will sound a little bit louder in the cab. They also have a little bit more thump in the low end, and a little bit more fullness in the mid-range. So they're distinctly different.
All right. Hey, what's up, Jay-Z?
But let's get
So this is the follow-up?
yeah.
Sure.
So his cabs could be late 90s. I bought one in 2010, about in the same year. Now, it depends on where you are and where they came from. Bought another one 3 years ago.
A VHT cab, not a
Yeah.
Hiwatt cab, a VHT cab.
It really all depends on where it came from. Did it come from a high humidity area like Florida, or in the Midwest, or did it come from Southern
Oh,
California?
totally. From Minnesota.
Yeah, so the amount of sonic difference in behavior could be environmental. It could be how much the speakers have been beaten up.
Well, the tree varies. Like there's so
Absolutely,
many
absolutely.
variables, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And of course, it's just like guitars. Even if it's plywood, it's Baltic birch plywood. It's very high quality plywood, but it is plywood. But it is wood, so every single cabinet is going to sound slightly different.
Yeah.
So if you take the environmental variables and then the material variables and then the wear and tear on the speaker variables, yeah, things are going to sound a little different.
Will you ever order a guitar?
But the P50s are going to be demonstrably different than the Fanes. Those are designed to bring out a little bit more of a robust mid-range
Totally.
and a little bit more punch in the and handle more power.
You ever? I know you've done this. You order a guitar with specific woods, and you have the basic blueprint of in your head of what they'll sound like. But if each of those materials land on the far end of a particular version of what that wood does, you have a drastically different animal than maybe the one that your buddy has that was made with the exact same materials, right?
I don't even go near trying to tell a guitar manufacturer what kind of wood I want a guitar made out of.
Well, I know you've had a couple experiences where you tried to do that and it bit you in the ass, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I go pick up a guitar, I love it, I buy it. If I don't love it, I don't buy it. If somebody says, the guitar manufacturer says to me, "Oh, I'll make you one just like it," I'm just like, yeah, right. Been there, done that. Nope.
Hey, what about this? What inspired the Memphis?
I wanted to take the Pittbull 45 out of the Pittbull line and make it its own unique animal. And we had, before the Memphis, we had made the Super 30, which was sort of a transition from the Pittbull 45, a 30-watt amp that did pretty well. And I wanted to expand on that whole concept, but I also wanted to separate it from being a Pittbull, because the Pittbull connotation meant that it was a high gain metal amp, and I was trying to get away from that. So the Memphis, the concept of Memphis was that the city Memphis in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, was a cultural meeting point of a lot of different cultures coming there to do commerce. And so there was an intermix, an interchange of cultures. And I know that's really trippy and out there, but that was my idea about the Memphis not having any relation to Memphis, Tennessee, but the idea that there were more kinds of different players that would be playing a combo amp than would be playing our big hardcore amps, and I wanted to make an amp that appealed to a broader spectrum of players from a broader spectrum of musical styles, and that's where the Memphis concept sort of fit in, and that's why in the front panel it has that sort of hieroglyphic vibe to it.
Totally. I knew it was Egypt Memphis, not Tennessee Memphis. Jay-Z, I didn't get to see Wayne, man. I had other stuff going on, and like a couple of my friends like hit me up in August and were like, "Hey, let's go see Wayne." And I was like, "Yeah, let's go see Wayne." And then when it actually rolled around, I think it was last weekend, right? I just had other stuff on the books, and that's a drag, because I think it was the Carlock Laphroaig band too, right? Which I'm embarrassed to say I've never seen that particular band, although I've been listening to them forever. Last time I saw Wayne, oh God, like 2013 or 2014 at the Catalina, and I forget, it might have been Laphroaig and Jamie's buddy from San Diego, blanking out, Cliff Almond. I think that was the band at that time. Did you go? I wish I would have went. I'm sad I didn't go. Here's another question, Steve. A PS Mini.
Conversation meeting.
You're not doing a PS Mini.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. There, when get our agreements on a PS Mini? As soon as we decide what kind of a PS Mini could adopt a small form factor without compromising the performance of a power station, which is really the physical size and weight that it is, because of the behavior that you expect from it. Anything smaller than that would either be a Class D power amp, which wouldn't behave the same way, or EL84s, which wouldn't have enough power really to produce the dynamics you might want. It's a conversation. It's not a bad question. It's one of those.
Okay. All right. All right. Braxton, thanks for hanging out, man. Yeah, you got to get some sleep. You got to get your kid to school. I hear you. Sunday night, got Monday in the morning, as we all do. Let's do one more question, because we're about to hit 3 hours and it's Sunday.
Time to bail. Yeah.
So we all need to get to bed. So Steve Lark, buddy. Steve, and I see that. Could you run down showing your interpretation of the different voicing switches sometime? Before we drop off, on what? Do you know what Steve means? The different voicing switches? Just be specific, and then we'll make sure Steve does that, and then we'll answer. Will the Memphis come back?
The Memphis actually is currently available.
Oh, okay.
It's not currently on the web store at the moment because the website is being updated. It's going to be, it's going to go live in a week or two, and the Memphis will be on there. If you're interested in getting one, you can get one now. It's a couple, 2, 3, 4 weeks lead time. You can email support or sales at fryat.com, and you can place an order, and we can produce it and complete it and ship it to you within probably 4 weeks.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Stephen, for the voicing switches on the SIG-X. We've never played the SIG-X on the show. We should get into that. We should definitely do that, and we'll do that for you, man. But I think that should be it, right?
Yeah.
Get the heck out of here.
Yeah, it's thank you all guys for hanging out. Tyler, thanks for your comment. The next show, come on and ask John Gorman about the Tweed. He had a couple of amps made in Tweed in the early 90s. It was a special request by a few people. We made a few of them, and then we stopped doing it. It was just sort of a specialist kind of a thing that we tried out for fun, and that's pretty much all there is to say about that. Thanks for hanging. Thanks for all the great questions.
Yeah.
I'm glad we finally got back to some of the older questions that we'd been blowing off.
Totally.
And
Jay-Z, I see your reply, man. That's cool that Wayne used your Jubilee. Maybe next time he's in town, whenever the hell that is, we can go together or something.
Hey, Ryan, it's all about the inspiration. Glad you're getting something out of this, and just keep carving away.
Tyler's asking a quick question about. I have a VHT Pittbull Classic 212. I bought it used, and it came with Tweed Tolex.
Yeah,
was that stuff?
I just
You
responded
just did that.
to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so all right, so we're good.
Yep.
All right.
Love you guys. Thanks for hanging with us.
All right, we're gonna do something we've never done. We're just gonna end it with no end music. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Good night, everyone.